A very good morning to you, wherever you are. Glad that you are watching KBC Channel 1 at this moment. You are right in time for live proceedings from the National Assembly. It is Wednesday, 24th day of July, 2019. Wednesday is a day where the National Assembly holds two sittings, one in the morning, another in the afternoon. The morning sitting, such as this one, reserved for private members' bills and motions. And as such, a number of bills and motions are listed for debate this morning. And before that, we have the introduction of five bills, and they include one that speaks to the controversial two-thirds gender rule. It is sponsored by Honorable Gladys Boss Sholei, a member for Uasin Gishu County. It is the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 53 of the year 2019. And this particular bill seeks to amend the Constitution by parliamentary initiative in terms of Article 256. And this will be to ensure that the number of members of Parliament reflect requirements of Article 27(8), that requires that not more than two-thirds of members of elective or appointive bodies shall be of the same gender. It seeks to ensure that membership of Parliament also reflects the requirements of Article 54(2) of the Constitution, that at least 5% of members of the public in elective and appointive bodies be persons with a disability. This particular bill also has an interesting proposal on amendment of Article 97 of the Constitution of Kenya, such that there is an increase in the number of elected women members of the National Assembly from the current 47 to 136. It further seeks to increase the number of persons nominated to the National Assembly from 12 to 22. And there will be a limit on these nominative seats, and there will only be for persons living with disability. The proposal also contains a sunset clause of 10 years. That is the window within which members shall represent their constituents in the National Assembly. But of course, there is some leeway for extension for a further 10 years, which can happen through an act of Parliament. The other new bill awaiting introduction in the House is by Honorable Simon Kingara, Member of Parliament, Ruiru constituency. It is the Land Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 54 of the year 2019. It seeks to amend the Land Act number 6 of the year 2012 and provide that where public land has been allocated to a public body or institution by the National Land Commission for a public purpose, or where land set aside by persons or land buying companies for public purpose, the Registrar of Lands under the Land Registration Act 2012 shall issue a certificate of title in the name of the public body, the public institution, or the relevant ministry, as the case may be. As it is currently, the public land and land set aside for public purposes by land buying companies are under threat of being grabbed by private persons, and in such cases there are no certificates issued, and because of that there are currently quite a number of disputes related to land ownership. The Banking Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 55 of the year 2019, is also coming up for the first reading, sponsored by Kiambu Member of Parliament Honorable Jude Njomo, same as the Parliamentary Pensions Amendment number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 56 of the year 2019, sponsored by Kigumo Member of Parliament Honorable Wangari Mwaniki. This and much more, including questions from members coming your way this morning in this broadcast brought to you live by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. My name is Vereso Mwanga. On behalf of the entire crew, I welcome you to follow the proceedings. Good morning.
Wajumbe, tuombe. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu, ambaye kwa hekima na wema wako umeteua nyadhifa za viongozi na mabunge kwa ustawi wa haki na utawala wa haki wa wanadamu, twakusihi ututazame kwa neema nyingi sisi watumishi wako, ambaye umeridhika kutuita ili tutekeleze shughuli muhimu za jamhuri hii yetu. Twakuomba ututeremshie baraka zako sisi tuliokutanika hapa, na utujalie tuyatende na kufikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili utukufu na sifa zako ziendelezwe, na ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi hii yetu na wale ambao haja zao umezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Amen. Order, members. We are just short of the required quorum, and I therefore order the bell to be rung for 10 minutes.
Good morning. If you're just tuning in, you are watching KBC Channel 1 live proceedings from the National Assembly. Wednesday morning is that sitting that is reserved for private members' bills and motions, and as such, quite some business listed on the order paper, but that can only be transacted as soon as the House attains a quorum as per the standing orders. And you can see there members of the House leadership rushing out to go and rally their colleagues to come in. The Honorable Benjamin Washiali has just walked out. This is actually on your shot right now. As members continue to come in, 50 are required. It is the minimum number as by the standing orders approved by this very House. The Sergeant at Arms keeping tabs, just taking notes, ensuring that the numbers are adding up. This morning, 5 bills lined up for introduction in the National Assembly, all sponsored by members. The Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 53 of the year 2019, sponsored by Uasin Gishu County Member of Parliament, Honorable Gladys Boss Sholei, that speaks to the 2/3 gender rule. That particular matter has come up a number of times, about 4 times in this very House, and flopped. And this is another attempt to reintroduce that bill that will make it possible for the National Assembly and the Senate, and indeed the bicameral parliament, achieve or implement what is stated in the Constitution. The Land Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 54 of the year 2019, sponsored by Ruiru Member of Parliament, Honorable Simon Kingara, is yet another bill awaiting first reading in the House, as is the Banking Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 55 of the year 2019, sponsored by Kiambu Member of Parliament, Honorable Jude Njomo, that seeks to amend the Banking Act and clarify any vague, ambiguous, imprecise, or indefinite words contained specifically in Section 33B. And this speaks to the issue of interest rates, and that there needs to be proper clarification on that. The Parliamentary Pensions Amendment Number 2 bill, National Assembly Bill number 56 of the year 2019, sponsored by Honorable Wangari Mwaneki, Member of Parliament, Kigumo constituency, is another one lined up for first reading, and it seeks to amend the Parliamentary Pensions Act, Cap 196, and raise the amount of pension due to former members of Parliament who have served between 1st July 1984 and January 2001. We do have a quorum, as indicated by the Sergeant at Arms. We shall have confirmation from the Speaker.
Order number 2, communication from the Chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
On that particular one, we have the lead.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the Wednesday, July 24th, 2019, in the morning sitting. The report of the Auditor General and the financial statements in respect of the following constituencies for the year ending 30th June 2018 and the certificate therein. North Hor, Bomet East, Nyaribari Chache, Kabuchai, Igembe South, Ruiru, Kaloleni, Kasarani, Lari, Kiembu, Nyaribari Masaba, South Mugirango, North Mugirango, Kitutu Chache South, Suna West, Mwatate, Langata, Gatundu South, Kiamba, and Likoni. Your audit report is here, so you better get a...
Very well. Let's go to the next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
That particular order, we don't seem to have statements. Neither do we have private members' questions. So we'll have the ordinary questions, which is, to start us off, will be the member for Konoin, Honorable Brighton Yegon. Honorable Yegon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask question number 330 of 2019, pursuant to provisions of Standing Order 42A, 5. My question goes to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. Question number 1. To guarantee security in densely populated suburbs in town across the country. How effective
Now, okay.
I was asking whether we are safe, Mr. Speaker. Question number 2. How effective is the emergency call number in need of emergency security response? And number 3,
On record on those particular. Yes, try that one.
thank you. Maybe I'll need to repeat.
You redo it again.
Question number 1. What steps is the ministry undertaking to guarantee Two, how effective is the emergency call number 999 for use by persons in need of emergency security response? And question number 3, what measures and facilities has the ministry put in place to guarantee security for all in the country? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Well, that one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. Then we go to the next member, Honorable Member for Kandui, Honorable Afula Wamunyinyi. So let's proceed to the next one, since I'm not able to, he's not in for now. So let's have the member for Homa Bay Town, Honorable Peter Opondo Kaluma.
Oh, this is where it is. Yes, sir. Speaker, I ask question number 332 of 2019. The question is to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing, Urban Development and Public Works. Number 1, what is the status of compensation for the land compulsorily acquired for the construction of Kabunde Airstrip in Homa Bay County? Number 2, what steps is the ministry taking to ensure that the airstrip is completed in time? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. So we go to the next one by the member for Bamachoge, Honorable Alpha Ondieki Miruka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask question 337/2019 to the Chairperson Teacher Service Commission, and it goes, number 1, could the Commission indicate the number of primary and secondary teachers that have been interdicted by the Commission in the last 3 years in respect to schools in South Mugirango, Bomachoge Church, and Ubas constituents? 2, were those teachers interdicted as per the laid down procedures, including giving them each of them a fair hearing? Number 3, which steps is the Commission taking to ensure that the said teachers are reinstated back to service within the stipulated timelines to mitigate against disruptions of running of schools in the affected schools? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This one is going to be replied via a written reply by the Teachers Service Commission. Next, which information I verily believe to be true, that he's out on official functions, so he will not be able to ask, and therefore I defer. Same for the next one, question 339 by the nominated member, Honorable Professor Jacqueline Adwol. She has also sought permission, which was granted, and therefore the question will be deferred. So we go to the next order.
Order number 8, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 53 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Constitution of Kenya. Order number 9, the Land Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 54 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Land Act. Order number 10, the Banking Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 55 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Banking Act. Order number 11, the Parliamentary Pensions Amendment number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 56 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Parliamentary Pensions Act. Order number 12, the Parliamentary Pensions Amendment number 3 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 57 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Parliamentary Pensions Act and for connected purposes. Order number 13, motion, measures to bridge trade deficit.
This is a motion by Honorable Major Retired John Waluke. And I think there are only very few minutes remaining. So I'm not so sure who is making a request to speak to it. Honorable Mbui, have you spoken to this one? You want to speak to it? Then I will have to take from the intervention. Sorry, it is Honorable Waluke who had 13 minutes. Honorable Waluke.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move the following motion. That aware that the Kenyan trade deficit has been on the increase in the past year.
Honorable Waluke, remember you had already moved, and therefore you had even put that on record. What you need to do is to simply finalize, because you have 13 minutes to go.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to urge this House to let them know that the deficit has increased, Mr. Speaker, and I want members to support this motion, Mr. Speaker, because it is a very important motion to this nation. Honorable Speaker, it is important to note that we pay a lot of money in food and machinery imports, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we have a very slow moving of export, Mr. Speaker, as a country. In the year 2018, Mr. Speaker, export being 612.9 billion, and imports was 1.760 billion, Mr. Speaker. The balance of trade, Mr. Speaker, is negative 114.7 billion. Honorable Speaker, the account has worsened to negative 441.8 billion in the year 2018 from negative 343.6 billion, Mr. Speaker, in the year 2016, Mr. Speaker. We are spending outside than what we get from outside, Mr. Speaker, and the overall balance of payment, Mr. Speaker, has worsened from 16.9 billion in the year 2017 to negative 105.8 billion in the year 2018, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are exporting jobs outside world, Mr. Speaker, to outside world, Mr. Speaker, yet we have very many youth in this country, Mr. Speaker, who has completed universities, and they have no jobs, Mr. Speaker. Why am I saying this, Mr. Speaker? Is because the export is slow, and we are bringing in too much imports. And the country is not getting enough, Mr. Speaker, even to repay for the international debts. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I brought this motion. And that's why I'm urging my colleagues, members of parliament, Mr. Speaker, to support this motion and to stand with the country, Mr. Speaker, at this time of need. Mr. Speaker, we need to look for the markets, for the export, Mr. Speaker, to add on the ones that we already have. Because we have been having very few countries that we have been exporting to, and we have not been doing more markets to cater us to export to those countries that we may get the new markets, Mr. Speaker, outside the world. Mr. Speaker, this has also not been better for importation of substandard goods, which have flooded the Kenya markets, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is terrible that this country still imports fish from China. And Mr. Speaker, even the fish that the country is importing, it is plastic fish. While we have a lot of fish in the Lake Victoria, Mr. Speaker, it's only Uganda that is exporting fish to Europe from Mikingo Highland, which is the Kenyan land, Mr. Speaker. I'm urging the government, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that they build factories for fish in the Lake Victoria, Mr. Speaker, because the fish that we have in this country, Mr. Speaker, can feed this country and export outside the country rather than importing, Mr. Speaker. Right from the coast, from the ocean, from Lake Victoria, from Lake Turkana, from Lake Naivasha, Mr. Speaker, and the fish ponds that we have in our areas, Mr. Speaker, are enough to feed this country, rather than importing plastic fish from China to this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the President recently with this deputy, President Uhuru, for reviving Rivertex. It's going to help at least our youth to get some jobs, Mr. Speaker. And we want the government to continue reviving many industries, Mr. Speaker. Flooding of substandard goods, Mr. Speaker, has killed many industries, Mr. Speaker, in this country, including the giant industry factory like Mumias Sugar Company, like Nzoia Sugar Company, Mr. Speaker, Muhoroni, and many other industries, Mr. Speaker. We bring in too much sugar and kill our own. So, Mr. Speaker, like what President Magufuli did in 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker, is trying to revive everything in his country, Mr. Speaker, while we are just watching. And he gave a very good example, Mr. Speaker, in Africa, when Kenyan people exported chicks in Tanzania, Mr. Speaker, 6,000 chicks were set on fire. And he did it himself, Mr. Speaker, as the president of that country. He ordered to pour petrol on it and he set them on fire. Why? Because he knew that Tanzanians can do that, can rear chicken instead of importing chicks from Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And when our cattle crossed over from the Maasai cattle crossed over to Tanzania, Mr. Speaker, they were auctioned. Mr. Speaker, we have been lenient and kind, while the deficit, Mr. Speaker, is increasing every day, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to stand firm as a House this time to show a direction with the government that we need to stop too much importation, Mr. Speaker, and give some subsidies, Mr. Speaker, to our farmers, Mr. Speaker. We are importing maize from Mexico. We are importing maize from Uganda, our neighboring country, Mr. Speaker. While if our people can be given subsidies, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure we cannot import food. We have killed farmers, let's say like Tabere Mwea scheme, Mr. Speaker. If those people of Mwea can be given subsidies, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure we cannot. We are doing importing rice from Egypt, from many countries, Mr. Speaker, to bring it into this country. We are importing even eggs from China. We are importing fabric, clothes from Dubai, from Italy, from Turkey. And it is good that now that Rivertex has been revived, Mr. Speaker, because I remember when I was in military those days, Mr. Speaker, our uniforms used to come from Rivertex. But for many years, past years, Mr. Speaker, we have been importing even police and military uniform from outside the country, Mr. Speaker. So time has come, Mr. Speaker, for us as a country to stand firm and urge the government to make sure that factories are revived for the benefits of our youth, Mr. Speaker, because it's like we are preparing a bomb. These people have completed universities, the youth of this country, Mr. Speaker, many of them, almost 1 million youth, Mr. Speaker, or 100,000 of youth who have completed universities and colleges, Mr. Speaker. And as a country, we are not taking care of them. I saw the other day, Mr. Speaker, when there was a youth, an architectural, with first degree, with a degree in architect, first class honor, Mr. Speaker, who has been washing vehicles. For the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker, that's what that young man was doing with his degree, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, time will come if the government cannot take care of this youth. Mr. Speaker, it's going when they. So, Mr. Speaker, as a country, we need rights. The people of the country, what they need, what we have, Mr. Speaker, and what we don't have. People cannot just be bringing in containers, importing, Mr. Speaker, while our economy is going down, Mr. Speaker, every day. People in the ministry, Mr. Speaker, I think they are lying to the government, Mr. Speaker, that the economy is doing well, yet the economy of this country, Mr. Speaker, is not doing well. Mr. Speaker, without wasting a lot of time, I want to call upon Honorable Chris Wamalwa, the incoming governor of Trans Nzoia, to second this motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay, then who is your seconder, Honorable Waluke? Honorable Waluke, who is your seconder? Because I am not aware about that specific title you gave now. Oh, you are seconding Honorable Dr. Wam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to second the motion by Honorable Waluke on the measures the government should put in place to bridge the trade deficit. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Waluke for coming up with such wonderful motion. This country, Mr. Speaker, as he clearly puts it, we're having a big problem in terms of the trade balance. And remove the motion, we must put measures in place, Mr. Speaker, to bridge the trade deficit. When it comes to matters of trade, Mr. Speaker, there are basically two variables here. We are talking about the export and the import. In this country, in value terms, whatever we are importing is so much and is in the excess of 1.7 trillion. And what we export, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing it's only a mere 500 billion. So you can see the trade deficit in value terms is about 1.1 trillion. And this is very dangerous to the country. Mr. Speaker, I went through statistics, some research, and I realized that the imports that we get in this country, about 60% comes from China. And this is where the country needs to focus, Mr. Speaker. We must put structures in place that can be able to help the business community in this country so that they can be able also to export for purposes of foreign exchange under Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have an organization, a Parastatal Export Promotion Council. One of the core business of Export Promotion Council, Mr. Speaker, is to help the local community, the small, medium enterprises, to access the global market. Exhibitions. We have big trade fairs in the world. We have in Europe. We have now in Asia, in America. The Export Promotion Council, Mr. Speaker, is supposed to organize the SMEs to help them to access the international market, Mr. Speaker. Also calling upon the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's why it is called the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. And the foreign policy of this country, Mr. Speaker, it is now commercial. The ambassadors, one of their responsibility is to market their country, Mr. Speaker. And it is the highest time we should be able to measure the performance of our ambassadors based on how much business they've created for this country. We see so many of them, they are looking for more money to be given to their missions. But in value terms, the returns on investment, it cannot be accounted. And one thing about China, where it is today, it is a communist country, we know that, Mr. Speaker, and everybody in China, when you talk to the ambassadors, they are looking for business so that their production in their own country, they create market for them to be brought here. So this is a learning lesson that our ambassadors, our high commissioners, in their foreign missions wherever they are, they should always look for market for our products to promote the exports, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when you talk of imports, we should not just be importing every Tom, Dick, and Harry. In China, Mr. Speaker, when you go there are different categories of products. There is product segmentation. We have products for the higher market, the middle market, and the lower market. But when you look at them with your naked eye, it is very difficult to tell the difference. But they'll tell you this is for this and this. So they've done market segments. So I think it's the highest time in Kenya, we should also maybe do the same. So that when we want to take our product to the market, we should be able to segment so that we'll be able to know which one is for the high market, which one is for the middle market, which one is for the lower market. Because when you look at the law of demand, Mr. Speaker, it must be backed with the capacity to purchase. You might want to drive a Mercedes-Benz, but your pocket will not allow you to buy a Mercedes-Benz. You'll end up going for a Toyota. So when we produce our product, it's important we do market segmentation. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, this country, this government of Jubilee has put measures in place before. We've had issues of Wealth Fund, we have had issues of Youth Fund, we've had issues of Women Fund. But unfortunately, this money is not being used to promote business. We have issues of corruption, Mr. Speaker. In the last parliament, Mr. Speaker, we saw the Youth Fund, the money being misappropriated. So the issue of corruption in this country, it is killing every industry, Mr. Speaker. When I was in China, Mr. Speaker, we know very well that a lot of Chinese businesses here have been involved in a lot of issues of corruption. But out there in their own country, corruption is not allowed. The Communist Party, it is actually on the forefront of fight against corruption. In China, we have found corrupt. They even shoot you. They even kill you. But there are citizens who are in this country, corruption is being tolerated. We have so many questions. And we are here to do a report so that you can share and see why China is going very far, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the infrastructure, I've gone to America, I've gone to Europe, I've gone everywhere. And I've not seen any country that can beat China when it comes to their infrastructure, particularly when it comes to their roads and their belt system, the way they've done this. And they have reached where they are because of the fight against corruption. In China, Mr. Speaker, whether you're a tiger, whether you're a fish, it does not matter. And nobody. I went there, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to exchange some dollars because I wanted the local currency. And one of the bankers helped me out. Allowed. He told me I cannot take a tip. That's how China is. So I think it's the highest time we should stop even giving tips, because we are trying to institutionalize these issues of corruption. Because when you give a tip, somebody will give you better services. Wait, Mr. Are producing their products, business communities producing their products, but they cannot meet the international standards. So the government should help these SMEs to add value in their products so that their products can be, once you add value, they can reach some standards whereby they can go and compete in the international market. A lot of our exports, Mr. Speaker, is based on agricultural products. We've been exporting coffee and tea. In our country, we produce very good tea, one of the best in the world, Mr. Speaker. So it is good the government helps the farmers in value addition. Our export will have higher value if we've done value addition. There was a program called AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity, something, the African Growth Opportunity Act, something like that, where the Americans were giving money to Kenyans so that we take our products to America. They do value addition, Mr. Speaker, then they export it back to us. This is something that we must be able to look into so that whatever is produced, whatever is being exported out of the country, we can add value to increase the value terms so that we can be able to break in the trade deficit. And we know very well, Mr. Speaker, if we stabilize the exchange rate, and it also inflation. We've seen the president the other day agricultural country, Mr. Speaker. We should not just stop at that memorandum of avocado. How I had wished that we identify farmers, Mr. Speaker, and we give them some funding so that they can be able to plant or provide seedlings for that issue of avocado, so that we can produce in good quantities and based on export avocado, Mr. Speaker. In this country, you're importing almost everything, even cement, for heaven's sake, Mr. Speaker. The other day, my cows were on heat, Mr. Speaker.
What did you say, cement or which one?
Cement, Mr. Speaker. Cement is, you know what cement is?
No, I don't. Tell me. You are the one saying it. But you are talking about...
For cows.
Okay.
Yes,
proceed.
for cows.
Proceed.
And we have Kevavapi in this country, the Kenya vaccines, which is in Lower Kabete, in Upper Kabete. They should pull up their socks and produce a hybrid that can be able to increase productivity when it comes to milk or meat, as opposed to farmers now going for import. I was surprised that the cement that we are using is not even from this country. I visited the ADC, only to be told that the cement that we produce locally, it is actually of an inferior quality, as opposed to the one coming from Netherlands. And you see many farmers, they're saying we have to go out there. So for us to bridge this trade deficit, we must embrace innovation. Innovation is very, very critical. The government should continue funding some of the SME, small, medium enterprises. When students leave universities, Mr. Speaker, they can also go into incubation. They can be trained so that instead of looking for jobs to be employed, they can be able to go even in farms and produce. I went to Kiambu the other day, and I met some 2 graduates of law. They are lawyers, and they've started dairy. They are doing very, very well, Mr. Speaker. So the mentality of our youth, that when you finish university, you must be employed, we must do it entrepreneurship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I second.
Very well. And I therefore propose the question, which is aware that the Kenya trade deficit has been on the increase in the past few years, with a financial year 1.1 trillion, noting that the deficit is mainly attributable to export worth 594 billion against import amounting to 1.7 trillion, driven mainly by more than doubling of food and machinery imports amid slow-moving exports. Concerned that the widening deficit has continued to pile pressure on the shilling against other global currencies such as dollar, alarmed that the high demand for the dollar to fund imports has been forcing Central Bank of Kenya to intervene, depleting foreign exchange reserves, even as the country continues to incur foreign debt. Cognizant that the rising imports amplified by flat export portends a difficult operation environment for the local enterprises and farmers, thereby denying the Kenyan employment opportunities when the local lose out for foreign manufacturers and farmers. Notwithstanding the effect that the protectionism policies which contribute towards affecting local industries and farm abilities to compete in international market, this House resolves that the government urgently puts in place measures to bridge the huge trade deficit, including by providing incentives to potential investors and farmers, supporting local production through promotion and protection of local industries, and implementing competitive export promotion strategies. Now, I hope the members who have placed their requests want to contribute to this specific one. We have top on the list, Honorable Mbui, member for Kadiani.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. First, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable John Waluke, the MP for Sirisia, and I want to say I'm sure the people of Sirisia are very proud to have a member that can bring such wants to deal with Kenya's international trade and improve the livelihood of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's balance of trade is skewed against us, and that is why our deficit on trade has been on the rise, currently at 1.1 trillion, and continuing to rise if this government does not take time to listen and put in measures that can help to bring down this deficit. Now, Mr. Speaker, the balance of trade deficit is brought about by the fact that we are importing a lot more than we are exporting. It's not rocket science. It's just a basic issue of how much are we buying and how much are we selling. If you're buying more than you're selling, then obviously, then you stand to lose out as a nation. And so today we want to talk about the solutions that this government can put in place to ensure that we do not buy more than we are selling. And the first solution, of course, Mr. Speaker, is to figure out how to increase exports to foreign nations. Mr. Speaker, I want to propose the following. The first one is that we have to figure out how to deal with the trade barriers, because we know that basically for us to export, we need to export to countries that are friendly, countries that are willing to allow us to export our goods to them. So we need to figure out, using our government and state agencies, how can we negotiate reduction in trade barriers? Mr. Speaker, you know there is the general agreement of on tariffs and trade that has been put in place, that most countries, including ours, have signed. And I think there are certain areas where we find that even though we have signed into GATT, there are those other countries that are very, very careless in allowing our exports to their countries. Figure out is how to economic blocks, because we already have a block. For example, we are already members of a community, East African community, which has so many partner states. Mr. Speaker, it's important to figure out how to increase our own activity in trading within that block. Mr. Speaker, I also think the government needs to provide technical support to improve the quality of products that are exported from this country. One of the reasons why it is not so easy to export much is because the quality of products that we produce in this country are not checked as they should. And Mr. Speaker, we have those organizations, those state agencies that have been given the responsibility to ensure that they provide technical support, they ensure that the production from this country is of high quality. And so, Mr. Speaker, organizations like the Kenya Bureau of Standards need to pull up their socks. They need to ensure that they spend more time checking the quality of products that are coming out of our market. Mr. Speaker, we have spent a lot of time selling raw products. You know, we sell farm produce directly from the farm. It is important to figure out how to do value addition before we sell our products out there. It is shocking that sometimes we export things like coffee, and then other countries that we import our coffee do value addition and sell it back to us at higher prices. So it doesn't make sense, Mr. Speaker. We must figure out, using our state agencies, how do we do value addition on particularly agricultural products before we sell them. Mr. Speaker, government can help us to customize products for specific foreign markets. It is a job of government to ensure that they do their research on behalf of Kenyan citizens that want to trade internationally and ensure that they figure out what products can we sell to which country. And when that is done, Mr. Speaker, it helps the people that can do the production in the country to have easy markets to sell to. So let us ensure that we provide information on customizing of products for foreign markets. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I went to Malaysia some time back, and I was surprised to find that there is a ban, a blanket ban on cut flowers from Africa. Yet we know that Kenya exports to the Netherlands, which by extension now sells their cut flowers in Malaysia. And Malaysians will buy cut flowers that have come from Africa but through other countries. Yet it is a simple thing to negotiate directly, as opposed to allowing our products to go through other countries, to reach other countries. We can figure out how to directly communicate and negotiate so that we can sell directly to them. So let us provide information on existing foreign markets for Kenyan products. I want to thank His Excellency the President, because he did find market in China for Kenyan avocados. But I think that's only a tip of the iceberg. We need a lot more of that. Mr. Speaker, government also needs to assist Kenyan farms to navigate non-tariff barriers. Not only do we have this taxation on imports, but we also have other barriers. Barriers like language, culture, legal systems, currency. We need to have our government organizations and government entities that spend time, you know, training our local producers on how to handle these non-tariff barriers, because that will help us to be able to reach those markets and sell our products properly. Mr. Speaker, the government also needs to provide financial support. Export subsidies need to be provided by this government, so that we need to encourage traders that are not only producing for the local market, but we encourage more, those that want to actually produce for the foreign market. So it's important that we provide financial support, because we all know that one of the problems that we face as a nation is financing for our businesses. So, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we provide financial support to those small businesses that wish to export their products. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of exports, we also have to be careful as politicians. Recently, a Kenyan, well-renowned Kenyan politician went on air and threatened international business people that are operating within the country. In fact, threatened to have them beaten and shipped out of the country. And Mr. Speaker, immediately that happened, it sends a very, very bad signal, because we also want to sell our products outside. So if the other countries were to reciprocate, it basically means that we will not be able to sell our products. So I want to say that reckless political statements need to be avoided so that we can improve our international trade. Mr. Speaker, we also need to reduce imports. And I want to propose the following two issues. One is, in order to improve imports, we need to reduce imports, we need to improve the quality of the locally produced goods. Kenyans import because we feel that the quality of the goods produced in Kenya are of inferior quality. And that is something we need to deal with. So we need to have the state organs ensuring that they help us to improve the quality of locally produced items so that we can be able to compete favorably with the international market. Furniture, people buy furniture for their homes from international markets. Yet we have the timber, and we have carpenters, we have well-trained people, artisans. So, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we improve our quality so that we can be able to reduce the imports. And of course, public participation. Government needs to go flat out and tell Kenyans, take pride in your country, buy Kenyan, build Kenya. And that needs to be sung to every one of us. All governmental institutions, all private institutions need to be able to buy Kenyan and take pride in that, because that helps our country and reduces our deficit. And when this happens, Mr. Speaker, we will find that not only will we improve our balance of trade, but we'll also reduce unemployment and help to improve our economy. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I support.
We will have the next one as Honorable Wachira Kabinga, member from where?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute to this motion by Honorable Waruke, and really congratulate him for thinking in that direction. Mr. Speaker, this particular motion looks like it's a simple motion, yet a very important motion for us in this country, Mr. Speaker, and more so when you look at the figures presented by Honorable Waruke on the trade imbalances, trade balances that we have, Mr. Speaker. Thinking of an export of about 1 billion against an import of 500 million, 1 trillion against an import of 500 billion, Mr. Speaker, one gets worried. Worried in the sense that, Mr. Speaker, when we make use of these export products, we are sure to be building somebody else's nation somewhere. A ton of an export of an import, Mr. Speaker, is taking care of young men and women in another country, yet in our country here, we are suffering in as far as employment is concerned, Mr. Speaker. It is also important for Kenyans to know that when we rely on imported goods, we are using and eating goods that probably we don't even know their conditions, Mr. Speaker. And now that we know all over the world that everybody is worried about preservatives that are put in food and, Mr. Speaker, causing, among others, cancer, we should be worried as a nation to ensure that we do whatever we can to look at some of those products that we can maximize in our own country, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy my brother all the way from Western recognizes that if we were to put more efforts and resources to the rice production in Mwea Tevere scheme, Mr. Speaker, we can feed this nation with rice. But what is happening, Mr. Speaker? Because we have given ourselves that comfort zone of importation, whenever we get these imported products, we forget about our own, Mr. Speaker. Whereas our farmers in Mwea are struggling to produce as much as they can, Mr. Speaker. Like now, we are talking of the planting season, Mr. Speaker. We are almost sure that we will not get the required fertilizer that would increase in production. What that will result to, Mr. Speaker, is another importation that we would have prevented. We also know that as those farmers suffer, Mr. Speaker, without fertilizer, with poor resources that would enable them to manage water, Mr. Speaker, with resources that would have gone to the expansion of the scheme.
It's better now.
It's Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting when you are interrupted, when you are putting in your points and you have to reconstruct them again, Mr. Speaker. I was congratulating my brother, Honorable Waruke, for raising this issue about import and export. And Mr. Speaker, I noted that among the products that we are importing in this country is rice. Rice coming from Pakistan and elsewhere, Mr. Speaker. And I noted that some of these products that we get here, we are not even sure whether they are fit for human consumption, Mr. Speaker, given the systems that are supposed to look at the quality and also the quantities that come into this country. Mr. Speaker, I'm told that some of these products that we take are actually products that are condemned, or those that have overstayed in the stores of reserves. And because people want to offload their reserves, Mr. Speaker, some of those reserves find their way into our countries. And for that reason, I'm urging our country and our government to ensure that we put more efforts, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we supplement the efforts that are being put by our farmers, efforts that are geared towards feeding this nation, Mr. Speaker. The Mwea irrigation scheme, and I want to congratulate the government. We are doing very well on our Diva Dam, Mr. Speaker. We are sure that it will be completed on time. We are sure that once completed, that particular scheme will increase or double the production of rice in Mwea. We can do better than that if we continue to get more and more water. But among others, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the government to look at the simple things that make our production go down and therefore resort to importation of rice from elsewhere, Mr. Speaker. Things like fertilizer. That is something that we can be proactive and provide fertilizer to farmers, not only in Mwea but also elsewhere, Mr. Speaker, so that farmers can increase on their products. Mr. Speaker, resources to manage, natural resources like water, is something that can also increase the production, Mr. Speaker. Looking at the markets, Mr. Speaker, that's another. Looking at research. Research is one area that we are doing fairly kind of badly in this country, Mr. Speaker. You realize that some of the farmers, not just in rice farming, but also in other areas, Mr. Speaker, research has been wanting. We are relying on the same type of seeds that we've been planting ever since, and that is why our production has kind of been constant, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I'm urging the government, through this motion, to look at some of the products that we can prioritize and say in the next 2-3 years, we want to reduce importation on those products by maybe 50%, Mr. Speaker, and that will be a great achievement. Mwea rice farming, Mr. Speaker, is a 7 billion economy. If that is a 7 billion economy, and knowing that the Mwea currently we are producing only 30%, it means, therefore, that we are probably importing rice worth almost 30 billion into this country, something we can prevent by taking care of the production of that rice in Mwea and other schemes, Mr. Speaker. I'm therefore hoping that moving forward and through this motion, that we will be able to come up with a list of those products once again that we can now say that we want to prioritize, we want to focus on, we want to ensure that we deliberately reduce our imports on those particular products. There are some areas that farmers suffer, and I am hoping that moving forward again we can take some of these things seriously, Mr. Speaker. If you look at some of these schemes, the road networks are the poorest you ever get. Yet these are people that are feeding this nation. You find that a farmer, to move his products from point A to point B, he would have to use his own strength to go and load into a cart. Then from that cattle cart, Mr. Speaker, struggle with it to get to the next point where you can probably get a tractor to move you to another point. Mr. Speaker, a lot of resources wasted, and we could input year by year some money to improve on this road network so that our farmers out there, sugarcane, rice, and others can feel motivated to feed this nation. In Mwea, for example, again, Mr. Speaker, whenever we plant, there are some birds that come. I hear some of them come from elsewhere, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and they come and feed on our rice that we have struggled to plant, Mr. Speaker. The last time I checked, Mr. Speaker, I was told that birds in Mwea in one season consume rice worth almost 100 million, Mr. Speaker. Again, we need to find ways of controlling some of these things that are reducing on not only on production, but also on the income of farmers to encourage those people so that even when you visit us, Mr. Speaker, you'll see motivated farmers who are ready to go into real farming so that they can feed this nation. These are some of the products that, Mr. Speaker, we can take care of, among others, so that in line with my brother's, Honorable Waruke's motion, this country can be able to talk about reducing this 1.7 trillion export to something like 700 billion in the next 5 years. And once we do that, we will start building our economy and we will start seeing employment, Mr. Speaker, getting better. We are all worried, Mr. Speaker, that our young men and women are lacking employment because of the investments that we are not making, or because of not making the right investments into areas that could have generated employment, Mr. Speaker. Farming is one area that can provide employment to our young men and women in a big way, yet we have not put the necessary resources that would be required to generate those jobs within those areas, Mr. Speaker. And so I'm hoping that through this motion, we can now start focusing and looking at those areas that will not only feed us in a way to make us healthy, but also generate jobs and also generate resources and ensure that the pressure that we currently have on foreign reserves, Mr. Speaker, could be reduced, and that way Kenya would grow as a nation that is healthier in a better way, and our children in terms of employment being taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this motion.
Honorable Atandia Onunga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak on this motion. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the most important ventilate on. Mr. Speaker, trade deficit is a very big problem in Kenya and also among many African countries. In Kenya, for instance, in 2018, our imports totaled 1.7 trillion, while our exports were about 600 billion. Mr. Speaker, this means that out of 100 shillings we spent on importing items, we earned only 35 shillings. Mr. Speaker, this is very serious. And one of the ramifications for such a large trade deficit is that our economy cannot be able to afford to create jobs for our youths. And two, Mr. Speaker, is that in the area of foreign exchange management, the country experienced a bigger shock. That, if you remember, Mr. Speaker, our government, our treasury had to go to IMF to look for what we call the standby letter of credit, which is supposed to help the economy protect us from foreign exchange shocks. So, Mr. Speaker, our trade deficit is a very big problem. But, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the numbers, you find that 3/4 of our imports come from Asia and China. And I was thinking about why we import more from China. I realized that one of the reasons we import more from China is because China produces cheap goods. Also, Chinese are very aggressive. You find them on the streets of Gikomba, marketing and selling their products. So, Mr. Speaker, I have been thinking about this thing, and I have realized that probably we have a tactless approach to the way we are managing our marketing of our local products. And, Mr. Speaker, the blame must clearly go to the departments that are in charge, such as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I think have not put in place proper mechanisms to engage Asia on how our goods can be able to be taken to those countries. Mr. Speaker, an example of a country in Africa that is engaging very well with Asia is South Africa. South Africa, Mr. Speaker, has been able to improve their trade deficit, which at some point 3 years ago was at the same level with Kenya. Also Ethiopia. Ethiopia is doing very well, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to encourage our Department of International Trade to engage more with with other foreign countries, especially Asia, because I think that our products can find good market in Asia if we have a proper approach on marketing. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that is hampering Kenya from producing cheap products that can be attractive in other markets is lack of energy, Mr. Speaker. We know that energy is very expensive in Kenya, and most of our factories locally are unable to produce competitive products because of the cost of energy. And Mr. Speaker, this is something that our government must focus on, how we are going to produce cheap energy. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, that because the energy is expensive, it therefore also means that our products are expensive, and they are not able to compete seriously in those markets. But, Mr. Speaker, if to bring you back, let me say that there's so much that we can do, and this really must be it must be in the thinking of our planners. Mr. Speaker, if the finance bill will shortly be published here, will be brought here in the House. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at the way Treasury experts are looking at where we are going to source our revenues, you will see that largely we are projecting to make more money from imports. So the thinking within our government planners is that importation is one of the very important core items that is going to help us grow our economy. Again, if you have planners with such kind of thinking, then you clearly see that the trade deficit question will never be addressed satisfactorily. So I think we need to start from the basics and insist that as we think about where the government is going to raise revenues, we must be aware that if government tells us that they are going to raise revenues from imports, then clearly we are widening trade deficit, we are causing Treasury to look for avenues of shielding the foreign exchange shocks, and we are actually encouraging borrowing, and basically we are talking about confusion. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to urge the sponsor of this motion to probably think of writing a law that is going to be implemented so that we can put it in law, that this is the way we want to restrict our trade deficit. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, we are simply going to be talking, and trade deficit is going to expand. There are some, as I said, there are countries that are seriously thinking about addressing this issue, and we can learn from what they are doing. One of the things that Ethiopia is doing is focusing more on exporting finished products. They are not merely exporting raw products like what we are doing. We need to find a way in which we can be able to make our products, to be able to export more of our finished products, value-added products, invest in value addition, so that we can be able to export more. Because I think people out there are more keen on finished products. What is Kenya sending out there? So I think let us put investments in the right places, and then we will be able to address trade deficit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Next is Honorable Mutunga Kunyuithia. And as Honorable Kunyuithia speaks, I will want to introduce in the public gallery students and pupils from Ndumoini Primary School, Kitui Central of Kitui County, Mabanda Primary School of Gatanga, Murang'a County, and Kangai Mixed Secondary School from where constituency in Kirinyaga County.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this motion. I would like to thank Honorable Waluke for bringing up this motion Honorable Speaker, this motion has been brought in good time for us to assess ourselves as a country and to ask ourselves very honest and very difficult questions. Why has the trade deficit been enlarging instead of reducing? And why has Kenya lost most of our quotas to the world market? Honorable Speaker, one of the 5 ways a country can create money or make revenue is through trade. And as long as we are buying a lot more than selling, Honorable Speaker, we are not making a lot of money. Not for the country and not for the individuals within a country. So we need to look at the measures that we could use to reduce trade deficit so that as a country we can also make money like the other countries have done. One of the things we should be learning, Honorable Speaker, is why did some countries, like countries in Asia, perform so well while we were at the same level in the early 70s? They have been able to organize their economies, and they have been able to be honest to themselves, and they have been able to do what is required of them to continue being in the world market. Honorable Speaker, it does not cost anything to be in the world market, and it's not rocket science to be in the world market. I would like to give a very specific example of rice in Mwea. The Mwea farmers are producing rice on the farm. They are processing rice right at Mwea, and they are selling at the world market prices. That is a classical example of what we should do with all the commodities so that we may sell our commodities across the board. Honorable Speaker, we lost quotas as a country, and we are not ashamed. And we should in the world market. We lost our coffee quota. We were selling 120,000 metric tons of coffee to the world market. We lost our beef quota. We have lost our pyrethrum quota, where we were commanding 70% of the world market. And we are leaving these commodities to other countries. A country like Rwanda, which is a small country compared to our country, is now almost leading in pyrethrum production. Why doesn't our pyrethrum industry perform? It is because of the individuals who are involved in managing this. And we would like serious intervention from the government to make sure that the individuals charged with the responsibilities of managing commodities do what is supposed to be done so that these commodities are managed in the best way possible. Honorable Speaker, when we make a decision as a country to rely on imports and not exports, when we deny our people an opportunity to produce what they are capable of producing, when we do not ask ourselves when do we have a comparative advantage and competitive advantage so that we may be able to produce for the world market, we make mistakes. And we have made enough mistakes as a country. The first mistake we have made is remained small in production all through. Other countries in Asia have been able to consolidate their land. They have been able to cause regions in terms of endemic zones or production zones. They know where to produce rice in large amounts. They know where to produce mangoes in large amounts. They know where to produce bananas in large amounts. Honorable Speaker, if you ask any technocrats in this country how much, for instance, bananas we produce, how many metric tons of bananas we produce, they will not be able to tell you. So we may not be able to invest in processing so that we can sell these commodities out. And that is one of the things that we need to do. We need to reorganize our agriculture to the processing so that even the big 4 can be achieved as an agenda. Honorable Speaker, this country is endowed with a lot of potentialities. We have almost all the agroecological zones that can be found anywhere. There are some countries which are half of the year they are cold and icy, and the other half of the year they are hot and warm and hot. And these countries are able to manage their climate, they are able to manage their production systems to be able to deliver to the world market as they feed their people. We are a country 56 years down the line, we are not able to feed our own people. A very small population of 47 or 48 million people, we are not able to feed. We should actually be ashamed, Honorable Speaker. And one of the reasons is that we let our potentials go. We let our coffee go. Our coffee quota in the world market was lost. We have lost our beef quota. We have lost pyrethrum. We have lost others. We are now relying on cut flowers. And I would like to say, Honorable Speaker, that we are being overtaken by Ethiopia as we watch, because there are many things that we need to do, and we are not doing them. So we need to manage our economy in a way that we should be focusing to sell our things in the world market. We need to teach our farmers to be able to produce to sell in the world market. We need farmers who are competitive producers, not farmers who are producing for their survival. What we have in this country, Honorable Speaker, are people who are trying to survive through producing both carbohydrates and proteins. You will find somebody has chicken, somebody has goats, somebody has sheep, somebody has poultry, somebody has everything, and in growing all the crops on a very small piece of land. That, Honorable Speaker, is not a farmer. That one is somebody who is trying to practice some magic. I think we need to categorize our farmers very carefully and register them so that we know in zone A, these are dairy producers and they're only producing milk. And then we locate our technocrats with these areas so that they can be able to support them to produce. We may not be able to sell in the world market if we are not competitive. Competitiveness has got to do with cost reduction. And the cost reduction is based on the size of production. If the size of production is more, the cost will be high. And if the cost is high, we cannot sell anywhere. We can only leave these people to feed themselves. More often than not, we find ourselves importing products that we could actually produce. Let us look at an industry called oilseed industry. We have deliberately, as a country and through policy measures, killed our oilseed industry. The farmers who could survive on oilseed industry thrive on nothing else. I mean, they try something else, something different. We can produce simsim, we can produce sunflower, we can produce all oilseeds in this country. But as a policy decision, we import. We spend more than $47 billion importing oilseeds into this country, instead of our farmers benefiting from this kind of money. We should be able to focus on supporting our smallholder. People say this is expensive, but we have the best technocrats. We have the Quorum system with all the scientists in this country who can be able to come up with varieties and genetic material that is cheaper for Kenyans to produce, even in arid area, in ASAL areas. And we are not focusing a lot on this. We are relying, we have left our farmer to survive on his own somehow. Our idea is that the farmer will survive anyway, and that is very wrong. Agriculture is not a priority in this country. If I look at 2018, 2017, 2018 budget, agriculture was number 11 in terms of funding. And when I talk about agriculture, I don't want to talk about infrastructure and others as they try to relate them and saying they contribute somehow to the agricultural sector. Africa took a decision in 2003, and our president signed what is called the Maputo Protocol. The Maputo Protocol presupposed that by 2008, 5 years down the line, the African countries will have supported the agriculture with not less than 10% of their budget. Those who have done that have grown. They are growing at more than 12%. They are growing at 2 digits. Those others like us who are lagging behind, the laggards, are still waiting. We cannot feed ourselves. And we cannot talk about exporting when we are not even able to feed ourselves. Honourable Speaker, we can talk about industrialization until the cows come back home in the evening. And we will never do this. Unless we consolidate our raw materials, we have deliberate decisions of how to produce and systems of producing. We have transformation measures and what we call a revolution. The other countries grew because they had agrarian reforms. Agrarian reforms were forms of revolution, agricultural revolution. They revolutionized their agriculture. When we read about the Tennessee Valley Authority, what were they doing? What do we get as a people? As technocrats of this country, we do not borrow those lessons and try them out here. We borrow those lessons and they stay with us. And when we retire, we kill those lessons. We travel this world and we learn.
Includes especially fish farmers and sometimes livestock farmers. And Mr. Speaker, you find that in areas where I come from, I represent members or the public in 7 habitable islands. And so the predominant activity in my constituency is fish farming, even though we also have other form of agricultural activity and farming. But Mr. Speaker, because we don't include fishing as part of farming, Mr. Speaker, the government does not have concerted action ordinarily relating fish farmers. You find that fishermen and fisherfolk put up their own factories. When they want to export their fishing to the neighboring countries like Uganda, Mr. Speaker, they are exploited, so most of those industries have closed down. And every time I meet them, their cry is, when can the government get involved? I know yesterday we put in the name of Honorable Chieng Beo for Fish Marketing Authority. But Mr. Speaker, other than that, Mr. Speaker, the fisher folk always struggle on their own. And it is not just the issue of the trade imbalance, and you can see that right now actually in Nairobi and environs, and even Kisumu, which is the source of fish, the bulk of the fish is from China, Mr. Speaker. And it is killing the fishing industry in the traditional Lake Victoria area, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, that is the essence of my amendment, that we consider the fisher folk And even as I know the mover of the motion, I can't see him, but I want to thank him because earlier on he apologized profusely for saying some not very nice things. And I know it is not because of that that he forgot the fisher folk, but I'm sure he would be agreed with me that including fisher folk and livestock farmers is appropriate, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, move, Mr. Speaker. And
who is going to be your seconder?
I'm asking my dear sister, Honorable Martha Wangari, to second.
Yeah, it should be fairly
Mr. Speaker,
straightforward.
because
So
I know
where
she comes from. There is also Lake Naivasha nearby.
Yeah.
and livestock farmers.
Okay, let's hear from you briefly in terms of your seconding, please. You have the phone, the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also agree with my sister, Honorable Millie Othiambo, that we need to be inclusive, and with that, just that remark, because I know it affects many of us, even in the Rift Valley, where some of these activities are carried out. I beg to second. Thank you.
Very well. So then I propose the motion, which is that the motion be amended by inserting the word including livestock and fish farmers after the word farmers wherever it appears in the motion. Okay. That being your wish, I put the question, which is that the motion be amended by inserting the words including livestock and fish farming and fish farmers after the word farmers wherever it appears in the motion. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of our contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. So the debate henceforth will be on the motion as amended, therefore to include livestock and fish farmers after the word farmers. Now next would be Honorable Dr. Pukose.
Yes. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to support the motion by Honorable Aluke on issues about the trade deficit. And this is something that has been a challenge to our country. And I would urge that the House resolves that the government urgently puts in place measures to bridge the huge trade deficit, including by providing incentives to potential investors, farmers, livestock and fish farmers and fishermen or fishwomen, supporting local production through promotion and protection of local industries and implementing competitive export promotion strategies. Honorable Speaker, this is when you go to Eldoret International Airport, more often you see huge cargo planes landing from Dubai, from Middle East, from other areas, and bringing in cargo. But when those aircrafts leave Eldoret International Airport, they don't leave with any cargo. Yet you'll find that farmers from the North Rift, flower farmers, horticultural farmers, they have to bring up their commodities all the way from as far as Kitale Endebess to JKIA. The reason, there is no cold room in Eldoret International Airport. There is no storage facility for these goods. I think this is something that the government has to seriously think and look at ways of how we can be able to enhance and provide incentives to these farmers. Honorable Speaker, the other day, the head of state, President Uhuru Kenyatta, opened Rivertex textile industry. But when you look at our rate of importing goods, even our own cotton farmers, whether we have really the capacity of producing enough cotton to be able to fit into the factory. That's where there's a challenge. Because this country has refused to innovate. This country has refused to take scientific evidence on use of PT cotton, biotechnology, and that is what other countries are using. The money, yes, GMO, for cotton, even for maize. And I want to educate my neighbor, the Honorable Ferdinand, that the dollars which you carry are made from PT cotton. In Europe, many of the farmers that feed their animals, they feed them with soya beans, which is GMO from North America and the US and other places. And the same animals, you'll import the milk powder, you'll also import milk, and you are claiming that you are not taking the GMO. So this is science, and we should be able to embrace science, not the other embarrassing thing of the other group. But this is embrace science. So, Honorable Speaker, I think it is a high time that this is a very timely motion in terms of how do we provide incentives to our farmers, how do we improve on issues of trade. Honorable Speaker, just the other day, we are talking of wanting to import, initially we are talking of 12.5 million bags of maize, then we've now moved to 6 million bags of maize, yet we don't have any proper data to tell us what is the maize capacity that our farmers have produced. In the North Rift, our maize will be ready in the month of October, November, and November. In Western Kenya, their maize is ready by the month of July. In South Rift, their maize is ready by May. If you talk of this country having a production of about 40 million bags, and then you claim that this country, the consumption is 48 million bags, that should put constant that all this production is produced at the same time. But that is not what happens. You have different areas producing at different seasons. We have our neighboring countries, Uganda, who are my neighbors on the other side. Their maize right now is ready for free movement. Tanzania, the same. You have the East African, we adopted the East African free trade policy, whereby the EAC policy on free trade in 2012. That means that Ugandans, Tanzanians, are supposed to move their goods freely in between. But that's not what happens. When you go to Swam Custom, the KRA officer, and I even informed Kipicho the other day, PS, that the KRA officer at Swam Custom in Endebess gets money from farm produce. He deducts money from those who are crossing either to Uganda or even coming to Kenya, or even our own farmers who are bringing their maize from swamp forest. That should not be happening. That's corruption. And I think this is something that needs to be looked into, and I'm urging the KRA and even the Customs and Immigration Department to be able to look at this officer who is getting money from farm produce and pocketing it into his pockets. That is some of the incentives that we are talking about. We should be able to allow our farmers to produce whatever they are able to produce. We should be able to allow them to move freely with their goods, because that is their entitlement. It's a free trade area. We have the East African treaty which is in place, and therefore our people, whether they are going to sell their goods in Uganda, their farm produce in Uganda, or they are bringing it from Ugandan side, or the same on the Tanzanian side, it should be free. Not somebody sitting at Swam Custom and collecting money which does not even end in the treasury. So with those few remarks, Ms. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support.
Very well, the Honorable Pukose Roberts. The member for Tharaka, the Honorable Burugara Gitonga. Next on my request list.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me add my voice to supporting this motion and say thank you to Honorable Waluke, because this is a very important motion. It is a motion that this country needs to sit down and consider and see exactly where we have gone wrong in terms of having our trade balances being equal or being based on same standards. Trade deficits which are also trade imbalances, are usually caused by export and importation of goods whereby the imports exceed the exports. It means that we are spending more money importing goods as opposed to the amount of money that we are receiving after exporting our goods. As a country, we must sit down and see how best we can export more than we can actually import. And when it comes to exportation, this should include the goods we manufacture, our agricultural food products, and even livestock and fish, as the motion has been amended to read or include. We do have an export processing zone in the country, and a lot has been said about it. We've devoted a lot of expenses into our EPZ, all with a view to ensuring that we are able to cure the deficit of trade balance. However, we are informed that in fact some exporters from outside have set up base in our EPZs whereby they actually do process goods, which later on they bring into the country as their own exports, and those become our imports. That in any way does not cure this trade imbalance. And we have to look for more innovative ways of trying to cure this deficit so that as a country, we move towards an economic balance of trade in our favor. Because the balance of trade now does not favor us at all. And this is why this motion is very important. We've talked about the various things, the various goods and services that we can actually export. And these are many. We only need to sit down carefully. Our policymakers just need to consider what we have with us, and using new inventions, techniques, and innovations, we are able to actually treat this trade imbalance. Let's take the case of manufacturing. Textiles. Not a while ago, we were highly endowed with cotton, which is one source of textile production that we have. The best quality cotton was actually from eastern Kenya, the areas of Tharaka Nithi, Meru, Kitui, and also from Nyanza. But eventually, and Mwea, eventually, this went down and the industry died. Instead, we started importing substandard goods, substandard textiles, and that was not in our favor. Let's go to food crops. We have sufficient and the best quality products in terms of food. We have rice from where? We have the best of coffee, we have the best of tea, and we have the best of green grams. The dengos of Tharaka, dengos from Meru, from Embu, the whole of Kitui, and Machakos. If we really added value to green grams, and we have ready markets which we are supposed to explore, including India, China, etc., we would actually now start treating this trade imbalance disease which is ailing us. We have the best of livestock production, absolutely. Our meat products are sold in the east of the world, and we are told the quality is extremely high. However, we are told of camels being exported to Saudi Arabia when they are live. Our sheep is exported to the Americas sometimes when it's live, the result of which you have not added any value, and the price for those products is very low. That cannot treat a trade imbalance. We have therefore to add value to what we export, as a result of which we are able to actually earn exports. We are exporting money, foreign exchange, in a quantity that will cater for what we import from those countries. Now, one way of treating trade imbalance would be to source for markets aggressively. And we as a country and the policymakers of the country, we have to aggressively market our country. We have to aggressively market our products. It is important that we actually sell what we have out there as the best. Incentives have to be given if we are really to produce and market what is able to compete out there. Because sometimes without incentives, and especially our country, which is a well-known haven of high taxation, then our goods cannot compete out there. This is the reason it becomes cheaper to import eggs from Uganda, to import chickens from Tanzania, to import sugar from Brazil, when we actually have our own sugar industries here. Simply because the rates of taxation in terms of inputs are too high, and the cost of production becomes extremely high. The net effect of trade imbalance in the country is gross unemployment. This is what is ailing our country. This is the reason why every Kenyan is crying that we have lots and lots of educated youths out there who are not employed. However, unless we are able to sit down and see what the root cause of such unemployment is, we will never cure the problem. And here today, we discuss a very important issue, which is the trade balances between two countries, Kenya and the rest of the world. Once it does not favor Kenya, then it leads to unemployment. If we address this, we are able to address the problem of unemployment. Once we cure unemployment, our rate of production goes high. We have a lot more to export, as a result of which we receive more foreign exchange, which will cover whatever we are importing from out there. So our central bank must be on the lookout on how to inject our money, especially subsidies in importation. Because subsidies in importation will definitely increase the trade deficit, which is also the trade imbalance. So, as I support this motion, I do urge our government to look into the products that we make locally. And I must make out a case for my constituency, where we have a lot of agricultural crops in the market. We have lots of maize, lots of beans, lots of green grams, etc., etc. And we also do keep livestock. We do not have a lot of fish, but this is also an area we can explore. At the end of the day, we will be able to export more than we can import, and the deficit would be cured. I therefore support this motion and urge the House to adopt the same, so that we can put into place mechanisms to ensure that our country has actually a positive trade balance and not the deficit we are talking about today. With those remarks, I do support.
Very well, the member for Tharaka. Let me have the member for Mwingi West, Honorable Guna Ngusia. You have the floor. Just give you another mic. It seems it's on, but unless you have no voice, Honorable Guna.
It's not working.
It's not working. Just use that mic.
This one is working, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity given to me this morning. Madam Speaker, I would like actually to congratulate John Waluke for bringing this critical and indeed very technical motion. Madam Speaker, it is worthy to note historically that since I was born, Kenya has never actually registered positive balance of trade. It has always been negative. What happened to a country?
You are saying since you were born?
Yeah.
Okay. You have the statistics.
Yes, I've not seen actually Kenya registering
Just carry
positive
on.
balance of trade, and it is regrettable. We are actually importing triple what we are exporting. Madam Speaker, it is worthy to note that trade deficit is not always very bad to a country. But when it is so consistent each and every year, we have to start worrying what we can do to bridge this deficit. Madam Speaker, it is worthy to note that sometimes trade deficit actually improves the standard of living. It reduces the threat of...
Order, the other members, please lower your consultation levels. The member for Kitui, Honorable CNN, must be heard.
Yes. So I'm saying, actually, trade deficit is not always really bad, necessarily bad, but when it is so consistent each and every year, we have to worry on how to bridge the deficit. Madam Speaker, it is worthy to note that out of all this, we can only bring this deficit by first taxing the imports heavily. Number two, subsidizing our exports. But this goes against the principle of free trade, which is occurred in many bilateral agreements. However, good governance, for instance, good legal system, justice legal and systems, will invite what we call direct foreign investments, and this way we are going to produce more in our country. I watched a documentary last evening about a farmer who has been rearing chicken, and truly it is regrettable to note that we are actually importing chicken from Uganda, eggs from Uganda, to the pigs, a small thing like that from South Africa, and many more imports actually we can't even count. Madam Speaker, with proper incentives, actually, we can encourage our local farmers to start producing and exporting more. It is worthy to note that even our commercial attaches in different parts of the country are not really helping our people to ensure that they are exporting what is necessarily good, or rather we are overproducing. Huge trade, positive actually balance of trade has been registered in some of the countries, even we never benchmark, like Russia. We need to borrow a leaf from Russia. We need to borrow a leaf from China, and not necessarily comparing ourselves with just local countries, or rather regional countries like Ethiopia. And if at all we are going to bridge this deficit, our commercial attaches in those different parts of the countries have to pull up their socks. Madam Speaker, it is worthy to note our cost of production in almost every sector, it's very high. We are talking issues of energy, electricity, one of the highest actually in Africa, not even, if not in the world. It is so expensive to run these affairs, and that is why I'm still saying that we have a long way of bridging this trade deficit. The only way to do that, it is to ensure that our exports are tax-free. To encourage this one, we have to look into that issue. Corruption in our country has actually increased every cost of production. When I recall how farmers are incentivized in this country, you really wonder where we are going. When I was growing up, my grandfather used to produce cotton, which was in massive production. Right now, anywhere in the Mwingi West, anywhere in Kitui County, Machakos, Makueni, Ukambani, these things are no longer actually being produced, or farmers are not even encouraged to do so, because a lot of energy has been actually geared towards incentivizing the coffee, tea, and fish farmers instead of other farmers. So, Madam Speaker, as we suggest these ways of mitigating these issues, we have also to consider where we went wrong since the independence. So, with proper mechanism actually of incentivizing the farmers, modernizing our transport system, and also reducing the cost of production, we will bridge this deficit. And with those few remarks, I support. Thank you.
Very well, you support. Honorable members, we are the ones who are walking in. We are on motion number 3, and we are debating it in an amended form. There was an amendment that was proposed and passed after farmers. So, members, we are debating it in an amended form. So, the member, I know, Honorable Soti, you are the next, but now that you are sat next to, I'm not punishing you, next to Honorable Nguna, let me get the other side and give it to Honorable Member for Barile. She has walked out. She's in consultation room. Member for Nyarimbari Church. The Honorable Tongi Nyangaka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity also to contribute to this motion. First, I want to take this opportunity to thank Honorable Waluke for a well-thought-out motion which addresses the concerns of Kenyans, concerns which have affected all of us as a country, because when we are not doing well as a country, it affects us at personal level, because when our youths are not able to get employment, Madam Speaker, we all get concerned because it's a major concern for all of us. And we know the strength of any country is really dependent on...
Order. Honorable Cecily Barile. Honorable Cecily Barile, I know you are next on the request list, but I can see you are sorting, but from the wrong... Thank you, Leader. Carry on.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for ensuring that there is order in the House so that we are able to discuss and debate in a way which is more clearer. Madam Speaker, as I was saying, that balance of trade is a concern for any country. Today, China and America are complaining at war of words, Madam Speaker, not because of anything, but just because of the balance of trade. And any leadership of a country which is not concerned and which is not perturbed with the situation as it is now, then we need to be worried as a country, because when there's an imbalance of trade as we have at the moment, because Madam Speaker, if you look at the numbers, they're so disturbing that our exports, Madam Speaker, is only 612 billion, whereas our imports is 1.7 trillion, Madam Speaker. That's mind-boggling numbers. Madam Speaker. And we need to do something about it, Madam Speaker, and we have what it takes to do something about it. There are many things we can do instead of looking at the low-hanging fruits, Madam Speaker, because I know the easiest temptation for most of us would be, can we increase the taxes? But increasing the taxes alone, Madam Speaker, without addressing the fundamentals, we are not helping the country, Madam Speaker, because there are other fundamentals which affect the exports and import, such as look at what it is that works well for you. What is it we can do as a country which is naturally grown here with minimal effort, Madam Speaker? If you look at our land system, Madam Speaker, is another concern for our country. We must see to divine on what it is we are going to do with our land, Madam Speaker. We cannot have land which is subdivided into an economical sizes, where everybody want to put up a structure, Madam Speaker, and we are putting a structure on a land which should have been left for agriculture, Madam Speaker. If you go to these countries like India, you go to China, Madam Speaker, you go to the USA and many other countries, They have come up with a system called Eco Village. Eco Village is a system, Madam Speaker, which encourages people to live in one location, in one spot, and they leave the rest of the land for development. And it's a policy. It's a policy that you cannot do anything about, Madam Speaker. And in the process, we have seen infrastructure being developed in those places. As a country, as a government, we go out of our way, we put up schools, Madam Speaker. We put up electricity in those places, Madam Speaker. We put up a sewage system, the water system, so that we are able to attract people to live in that eco-village. And in the process, we are freeing the land for development, for agriculture, because we know one of the biggest contributors to the economy, Madam Speaker, is the agriculture. And once we are able to fix those concerns, Madam Speaker, we by default will have created employment for our youth. Madam Speaker, long are the days when our youth wanted to do agriculture as a career. Most of us imagine when we talk of employment, we imagine of a white-collar job, Madam Speaker. But we all know that most of the people who have money in this world, people who have made money in the world, Madam Speaker, most of them have got their money from the soil. And actually, even the Bible talks about it. The Bible talks about the land, it talks about the soil, and it has blessed it. And it has said that even wherever you step your foot, I'll bless it. Wherever we put our land, we use it, we grow it. The food is going to be a blessing to all of us, because then we'll have addressed, we know, be able to grow natural food, Madam Speaker, which is organic. And when we grow organic food, Madam Speaker, not only that it's going to fetch us a good price in the world market, but it's also going to ensure that as a country we are going to have healthy people. If you look at the concerns we have nowadays, Madam Speaker, issues of cancer, these were never issues of Africans, because our food is organic, Madam Speaker. It's grown naturally with no chemicals. But if we don't develop a strategy, we don't come up with a policy which ensures that the land we have, which is very fertile, Madam Speaker, like in Kisi, where I come from, Madam Speaker, if you go to my constituency in a location called the Keumbu, whenever you're going to Kisi, you're actually flooded. You're inundated with the market, the people selling their bananas. And it pains me, Madam Speaker, when I see them selling banana at a throwaway price. You look at the avocados. We have the most beautiful avocados, the most tastiest avocado in this part of the world. They come from Kisi. And most of these foods, Madam Speaker, are grown effortlessly. What if we came up with a policy as a government of ensuring, and I'm grateful to the President, His Excellency, the President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, that is working so hard to ensure that we're getting an international market for avocado, Madam Speaker. I can't wait for that market to happen, because we have such a huge production in Kisi that most of it food will have created employment for the youth, which is the biggest concern for this country, because unemployment is a major concern. And I'm sure most of us, whenever we go home, the concern we have from our parents, our family members, and everybody else is that how are you going to, what are you doing about your siblings who are not working, who have not secured an employment? So we must address that, Madam Speaker, and I believe by addressing this, we'll have addressed that by default. Madam Speaker, there are other things we can do as a country to encourage and to ensure that we are going to grow our exports. Madam Speaker, if you look at in Kenya today, God has given us such a beautiful environment, which is by minimal effort, Madam Speaker, we are able to grow a lot. Madam Speaker, they just moved the parasa next to my position, and I'm not able to even hear myself.
Order, order. Honorable CNN.
Thank you.
Honorable members, we must observe procedures and conduct of the House. Honorable CN, can you bend, come back and consult with your honorable member? We don't just crisscross. Honorable members, I think we are not first-timers anymore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for ensuring that they are consulting on low tones. Madam Speaker, I was saying that there are other things we can do as a country, which is going to enable us to have an advantage over the import imbalances that we have today, Madam Speaker. God has given us in Kenya one of the best climate. He has given us, nature has given us one of the best environment, Madam Speaker, to live in. We have a natural way of tapping into electricity, Madam Speaker. If you look at the electricity mix today, most of it is actually natural. We have hydroelectricity, Madam Speaker. We have geothermal electricity, Madam Speaker. We have solar electricity, Madam Speaker. We have wind electricity, Madam Speaker. These are some of the things we can do naturally with minimal effort, Madam Speaker, because it requires only one of investment. And once we have them in place, Madam Speaker, then the excess electricity will be able to export it and sell it to the international market, Madam Speaker. We have seen countries investing and doing business of electricity. And as we have the chance, we have the potential, we have the manpower, we have the skills. Our youths have gotten the knowledge and the know-how on how they can run this show. We are not using foreigners to do it, Madam Speaker, other than buying the machines, because we cannot produce them here at the moment. And I hope that someday our Silicon Valley should be able to produce them, but we can be able to get this done and done well so that we are able to grow the market. Controlling of the land prices, Madam Speaker, is another concern. Our land is too expensive to attract the foreigners who are going to produce locally, then we'll be able to import, Madam Speaker. If you look at to go there and invest, because their land is reasonably affordable. In Kenya, we are making our land too expensive, Madam Speaker, to the detriment of our economy. What is it we can do as leaders? And I'm sure we engage our minds, and we are engaging us seriously. What is it we can do to cap the prices of land so that our people are not disadvantaged in terms of export? With that, I support Madam Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity.
Very well. Very well. Thank you, Honorable Member, for your rebuttal. Honorable members, let us observe the procedures and rules of the House. Let us behave with some decorum in the House. And lastly, it pains me when we start correcting honorable members in the chamber. We know what is required of us, and we know what is not required of us. The member for Ingembe South. No, before we had the member for Honorable Sot, and we are aware you do not have a card. Please approach the dispatch box. You can
Thank you.
Max. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important motion. Madam Speaker, I think this is one of the most well thought out motions that this House has debated. And I want to thank Honorable John Waluke for bringing this important motion to this House to be debated. Madam Speaker, the trade deficit is a very, very important economic variable. And when we talk about trade deficit, we are talking about many, many other aspects that affect the economy. We are talking about foreign aid. We are talking about foreign direct investment. We are talking about balance of payment. Madam Speaker, we are talking about interest rates. We are talking about currency valuation. All these issues are impacted by the trade deficit or trade surplus. And therefore, Madam Speaker, when you look at it all, you realize that this is a very, very important aspect of the economy that this House should take very seriously. Madam Speaker, this motion in the amended form seeks to provide measures to bridge the deficit, trade deficit, by providing incentives to potential investors, farmers, fishermen, and livestock farmers. And the issue of provision of incentive, Madam Speaker, is key, because we cannot produce enough for export if we are not investing in our farmers, if we are not investing in our investors so that they can produce more goods and services for export. Madam Speaker, it also seeks to support the local production through promotion and protection of local industries. Madam Speaker, I think this country has to relook at its industrialization policy, because most of our industries are dying. And I want to commend the President for opening Rivertex and the promise also to open Kikomi. But we also need them to consider reviving our sugar industry. Mumias Sugar Company, Moroni Sugar Company, Zoya Sugar Company, and all the other sugar companies which are on their deathbed. We cannot be talking about Big Four agenda manufacturing when we are watching as our industries, particularly Mumias Sugar, which was one of the leading tax givers in this country. It is on its deathbed, and very little is being done to revive that industry. This motion also seeks to implement competitive export promotion strategies. Madam Speaker, we have several institutions that are supposed to be doing this work of promoting export. We have the Export Promotion Council, we have the EPZ, we have the Brand Kenya. We hear very little of these institutions. Madam Speaker, I think it's a high time that this parliament must interrogate these institutions that are spending taxpayers' money, and we are not seeing their impact, because that is what they are supposed to be doing. But Madam Speaker, the other very important thing is that, as one of the members said, that trade deficit, sometimes it is not necessarily a negative thing. We know that United States has the highest trade deficit in the world from 1975, but they are still an economic giant. It is because they consume more. They consume a lot. Their level of preference for goods and services is very high. And therefore, there is need to export more goods to the country, which actually reflects the country to be having higher standards of living. But that is not the case for our Kenyan case. Our Kenyan case is negative. It is not because we have higher standards of living, but it's because we import more than we export. But Madam Speaker, when you look at it also, it affects the level of unemployment. Because what it means is that when you export more, when you import more, it means you are promoting industrialization in the other country. You are basically outsourcing jobs in the other country, and therefore creating unemployment in your country. So it's a negative thing to this country. One of the speakers talked about having a relook at our foreign policy. I want to agree with Honorable Wamalwa that our foreign policy is not promoting investment. One, we have our ambassadors who are largely more political. We need to ensure that when we appoint people to represent us in our missions, there must be people who understand what we call economic diplomacy. They can sit down with the leaders in those other countries and talk trade and bring more investment into this country. Port in Mombasa, that tells you something, Madam Speaker. It tells you that opportunities for trade are available in Africa. And we need to maximize the trade opportunities available in Africa by promoting infrastructure within the countries in Africa, and also ensuring that the bilateral and multilateral agreements we have make sense. Madam Speaker, this country is in so many agreements. We are in COMESA, we are in EACC, we are in now the new one, which we call the African Continental Free Trade Area. What is the benefit of all these agreements when all these countries are almost in the same geographical area? The recent Africa Continental Free Trade Area offers an opportunity for us to trade free movement of goods and services between countries, where this country now can benefit. Because it makes no sense that an African country which wants to export to another African country has to fly the goods to Europe and then back to Africa. Because we don't have proper arrangement on infrastructure and movement of goods. And I want to thank the African Union for now putting a lot of focus on infrastructure development. There are plans to have trans-African roads, trans-African railways, and that will improve trade among African countries. Madam Speaker, lastly, is the management of trade department in government. Madam Speaker, during the last regime of President Kibaki, we saw a lot of focus on trade ministry. And we had very competent people in the trade ministry. Honorable Mukisa Kitui, even our current president, Honorable Uhuru, Honorable Wetangula, and we saw a lot of vibrance around the trade ministry. But what has happened to our trade ministry? It is not doing much. And we cannot improve our trade deficit if we don't have a functional trade ministry.
Honorable Sort, this is a house of record answered. Your time was over, so members now to plan your time. Yes, the member for Ingebe South, Honorable Mwiringi Paul.
Asante sana Bi Speaker kwa kunipa nafasi hii kuchangia huu mswada ambao umeletwa na mwenzangu Mheshimiwa Waluke. Mheshimiwa Speaker, ukiangalia hapa nchini Kenya, kile ambacho kinatufanya saa zingine kila wakati tunaleta haya mambo wakati ambapo serikali inaagiza pesa kwa wingi kutoka nje ama ile mikopo ambayo tunaagiza, ni kutotilia maanani zile kazi ambazo Wakenya wanafanya hapa, Bi Speaker, na zile ambazo zinaweza kufaidi hii nchi kwa kupata hela nyingi. Sababu ukiangalia kama wakulima wa hili taifa la Kenya, Bi Speaker, ni kama hili swala limeachwa nje na serikali ya Kenya. Sababu utakuta zile bidhaa ambazo zinaagizwa kutoka kule nje, bidhaa zingine tunazitengeneza hapa nchini, Bi Speaker. Na kama serikali itayatilia maanani na kuanza kutilia mkazo kwa zile bidhaa ambazo tunatengeneza hapa, ni kumaanisha ya kwamba tutaweza kuwa na hela za kutosha na hatutakuwa tunaomba mandeni kutoka kule nje. Kwa mfano, Bi Speaker, kuna samaki zile ambazo tunakuza hapa katika nchi, kule Kisumu na kule ambako tuko na zile kule ambako wakulima wamewekeza na kufanya hiki kilimo cha samaki, Bi Speaker. Na sio vizuri serikali kuwa kila wakati tunaagiza samaki kutoka kule nchi ya China ili wakuja kufanya biashara hapa. Na hiki ndicho kinafanya wakulima wa samaki saa zingine waweze kukosa matumaini ya kuendelea na hiki kilimo, na hiyo inapelekea hii naksi kuendelea kuongezeka. Bi Speaker, katika kilimo pia, wakati ambapo serikali inatenga zile fedha ambazo zinafaa kuangalia kilimo, saa zingine unakuta wakati ambapo bajeti inatengenezwa hawaangalii sana ama watilie mkazo mambo na kilimo. Sababu kama wangetilia mkazo kilimo, Bi Speaker, tungekuwa tunakuza vitu vingi kama wakulima wa kahawa, wakulima wale ambao wanaweka mfugo, Madam Speaker. Hizi ni bidhaa ambazo tungekuwa tunaziuza hapa nchini na pia kuuza kule nje, na tunapata hela kutokana na hayo. Pia wale wawekezaji ambao huwa wanakuja katika ile taifa kuwekeza, Madam Speaker, kama serikali ingetilia mkazo na kuwahimiza ya kwamba hapa Kenya tuko na ardhi ya kutosha pale ambapo wanaweza kuja na kuwekeza vitu zao, Bi Speaker, tungekuwa kupata pesa nyingi kutokana na wale wawekezaji. Madam Speaker, vile vile katika zile jopo ambazo zinatengenezwa na serikali za kuenda kule nje kutafuta soko za bidhaa za hapa Kenya, ni vizuri wakati ambapo serikali inafanya haya mambo wakishirikiana na hii kamati ya biashara pamoja na ukulima, wakati ambapo wanaenda kule kutafuta biashara, ni vizuri kuangalia kama mkulima yule wa miraa, kama pale ambapo nimetoka Madam Speaker, ile miraa ambayo tunakuza pale ni mingi sana, na wakati ambapo serikali inaenda kule kutafuta soko, hakuna mahali ama hakuna wakati ambapo nimesikia serikali imeenda nje kutafuta soko ya wakulima wa miraa. Sababu saa zingine Madam Speaker, ile miraa ambayo tunauza kutoka kule ina hela nyingi, na wakati ambapo serikali itajitolea na kuanza kutafutia pia wale wakulima wa miraa soko huko nje, Madam Speaker, inaweza kuleta pesa kwa wingi hapa, na ni pesa ambayo inaweza kuongeza pesa ile ambayo serikali ingekuwa inaendelea kuomba mandeni kule nje, wanaweza kuwa wanategemea.
Order. There is a Kamkunchi in the house.
Asante sana.
The members sat but not next to Honorable, so I don't want to mention your names because I'll rule you out of order. Honorable members, please, you must behave in a decorum. Can the member be heard? Thank you. Carry on.
Asante sana Bi Speaker kwa kunilinda kwa hili. Nilikuwa naongea kuhusu ile miraa ambayo tunakuza kule, Bi Speaker, na ni kilimo ambacho kama serikali ingekitilia maanani na wawe wanaitafutia soko kule, tungekuwa tunapata hela nyingi, kama vile ambavyo nchi ya Israeli, Madam Speaker, imeanza kununua ile miraa kutoka mwezi huu, na ni kumaanisha ni pesa ambazo zitakuwa zinafaidi serikali kwa njia kubwa, sababu ukiona hapa zile bidhaa ambazo tunaagiza kutoka nje ni bidhaa za hela nyingi kulingana na zile ambazo sisi tunauza kule nje. Kwa hivyo kama serikali ingetia mkazo kwa kilimo ama wakulima wa hapa nchini waangaliwe, nadhani tungekuwa tuna zile pesa ambazo tungekuwa tunaomba kutoka kule nje zingekuwa chache, na mwananchi pale angekuwa anafinyiliwa wakati ambapo serikali inataka alipe kodi. Kwa hivyo kile ambacho kinawafanya ama kile ambacho kinatufanya ama kinafanya wananchi walipe kodi ya juu, Madam Speaker, ni ile ama ni serikali imefeli kufanya ama kutekeleza yale ambayo yanaweza kumsaidia mwananchi katika kukuza bidhaa hapa na ili tuweze kupata pesa nyingi. Kwa hivyo Madam Speaker, wakati ambapo huu mswada utapita, ni vizuri hii serikali iangalie mwananchi wake kwanza, alafu yule mwingine ama yule ambaye tunanunua kutoka kwake akuja akiwa nambari ya pili, na hili litasaidia ama hili jambo litaweza kusaidia nchi kupata pesa kwa wingi, sababu sio vizuri wakati ambapo tuko na bidhaa ambazo tunaweza kuziekeza na zitoe pesa nyingi, zitoe pesa nyingi za kusaidia nchi, wananchi ama serikali inatupilia mbali haya, na alafu tunaweka yule mtu wa kutoka kule nje tunamweka katika mstari wa mbele. Ni vizuri serikali imshughulikie huyu mwananchi wake kwanza kwa kuyashughulikia yale ambayo yanaweza kumsaidia kuzaliza fedha zaidi kushinda zile ambazo tunazipokea kutoka kule nje. Kwa hayo machache naomba kuunga. Asante.
Naomba kuunga mkono. Asante sana mheshimiwa kutoka Igembe South kwa Kiswahili yako sanifu, and the house must also know the house allows you to speak either in English as you make your contribution, but we don't mix both. May I have the member for West Mungirango, the Honorable Mogaka, Members, I have 17 requests from the members who want to speak to this particular motion, of course. But I want to assure you we will all be able to get time to speak. Let us be patient. So, member for Westmo Girango? Oh, yes, he's in consultation room, I'm aware. Then we have the member for Kwanza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity. And on onset, I want to thank Honorable John, the member for Seresia, for coming up with the motion, which I think, to me, Madam Speaker, I think it was not unexpected. Trade deficit in this country is regrettable because I think it's our own making. Madam Speaker, I'm talking this because I've been here all these years, and I saw this coming because of our own undoing. One, very, very important, Madam Speaker, is the fact that we used to have a slogan, which you and I know, Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. It was very popular. We even had a brand authority where actually we are promoting our own. Madam Speaker, you won't have to also to protect me from this, my neighbors who are actually very excited about this motion.
Neighbors?
Am I protected?
Oh, are your neighbors, and remember?
This was on my right.
You don't generalize because I must protect you. Who is your neighbor?
But, Madam Speaker, on a very serious note, let's be concentrating on this motion, which is going to help our people.
The neighbors to the honorable member for Kwanza.
Yes.
You are out of order. We need to protect the member for Kwanza. Honorable member, you are protected.
Delaying,
honorable member.
Madam Speaker, I want to say that I was talking about the first few years of after independence, and I think we are doing very well as a country. There are these slogans of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. We even had brands, the brand Kenya, and most of our exports actually were doing very well. We are actually the major economic hub in the region. We're exporting to countries like Uganda, Rwanda, and of course Burundi, Tanzania. And of course, at one time, the late president of Tanzania said, man eat man society, because we are doing very well. Somehow, somewhere, the rain started beating us. And therefore, that's what I'm saying from the onset, that's our own making. We should not be where we are today because we have made quite a number of mistakes. We therefore have to increase our exports. We have even an authority called Export Promotion Center. They have been very active of late. I don't even hear about them. What happened? Because we have a lot of opportunities out there. You and I and other members of parliament have gone out there, and when you go out there, you find that people respect this country because of what we have been, a very peaceful country, hard-working people, but today is a shame. I must say, I was in America the other time on the coffee promotion, and I saw the previous show in America. Kenya was actually the leading country. And I was surprised at that time when I went on the trade show that Rwanda, which had been at war, had overtaken Kenya. Reason, you and I know. So we have to do something to promote most of our products locally. I want to also take this opportunity to thank His Excellency the President. Rivertex in Eldoret was doing very well until we now started importing synthetic products from I don't know where, from the east. We were doing very well. We were exporting products from Rivertex. Thika Textile Mill was doing very well. Kisumu Cotton, Kisumu what? Kikome. What happened to our country? And we are leaders here. We are now talking about, oh, no, something went wrong somewhere. And you know, we actually killed cotton production in Western Kenya. In Ukambani, they were planting actually cotton, and I remember we were doing very well. It was locally produced here, but what happened? We stopped having the agricultural extension services, which would have helped our farmers. And so what? We went to white-collar jobs and forgot about our own initiatives. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I want to say this with bitterness, that the rain started beating us because we actually are careless ourselves. We should be doing better. What happened in Kikomi, in Kisumu? When I was doing my primary school, that was a factor that was doing very well, offering jobs in Western Kenya. Rivertex in Thika, offering jobs here. And of course, Eldoret as well. So we have to do something about it. The Minister of Foreign Affairs have got commercial attaches. Their job description, their mandate is to look for trade links with our country. The commercial attaches in this, on the foreign affairs, and we have foreign affairs all over the country, the world. What happened? They are not doing their jobs. I'm sorry, the Minister of Foreign Affairs should wake up as well, be able to promote our products overseas. Look at the counterfeit products that come from the East. We get from the East, nothing wrong. We still have to send our products in China and whatever, Korea. And I want to remind this country and this House that 1963, when we got independent, Kenya was at bar with South Korea. Kenya was at bar with Malaysia in terms of trade, and I think they have overtaken us. I had the time to go to Malaysia, and they are miles away. The export promotion, the export processing centers, where they make, where they manufacture all sorts of things like that, they are doing so well. We tried to do it here, we could not. So we should not start lamenting. We should wake up and start working so to be able to make sure that our product made here find a market elsewhere. So restriction of counterfeits should be something that we should make a stop, because most of these things that come here from the Far East are inferior products. No wonder we are importing cancer in this country, because some member actually mentioned, and I quite agree with him, that importation of some of these food products like rice. Surely, how do we import rice in this country? For heaven's sake, we have rice here, a lot of rice here. We have rice in Yala, Dominion farms who are doing very well. How do we import rice in this country from the East? Maybe we are importing the GMO. No, we're actually having a problem with the cancer. And therefore, I think, Madam Speaker, we should be able also to stop the counterfeits that come this country, particularly the consumables. Today, Madam Speaker, again, something very critical, this country, you go to Kibera here, you go to Isli, you'll find products that actually are manufactured in Uganda. The milk products coming from Uganda, they are here.
Don't talk about Isli.
Isli, where you come from, where my friend is just coming from. You go there, you find milk products actually. No, you have just walked in here. Madam Speaker, you protect me from Janet because he's just walked in. He wants to be noted that he has come in. But all I'm saying is that we're importing...
Honorable Wanyonyi, I can see a lot of exchange between you.
Madam Speaker, I ignore what...
Maize farmers have problems in this country, and he's representing.
So what is out of order? What is out of order?
I'm from Isli when he knows I am from Suna East constituency. From Migori
Honorable Wanyonyi, and you know, Honorable Junet, you've just come in and you've rattled him. But Honorable
You know,
Wanyonyi, please, Honorable
Madam-
Junet is a member for Suna. I don't know, you can clarify. Though he rattled
Madam
him.
Speaker, I think he's a good friend of mine, but when he was walking in,
Yes.
he talked about Isli. So I associated him with Isli.
That,
And,
that
know,
you treat such as
his
noise.
ethnic group is from, most of them are from Isli. So when he talked about Isli, I forgot. I apologize.
Thank you for being on record. He's a member for Suna. Yeah, thank you.
He's actually a member for Suna, a very effective member. Madam Speaker, I want to therefore urge this House and say that we should be able to pull up our socks and promote the product made in this country to be able to build this country economically. With those few remarks, I support the motion as amended.
The Honorable Oyula Maro, member for Butula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to give a few comments on this motion. I'll start by thanking Ms. Honorable Waluke for bringing this important motion to this House. Mr. Speaker, as it has been mentioned elsewhere, you will remember that our country, Kenya, started off very well immediately after independence, and there was a lot of growth witnessed in this country, and the exports from this country were felt in very many places. For instance, Mr. Speaker, you will remember that Kenneth and Raymond factories in Eldoret, very high quality products. The shops in Europe, all those collapsed. Mr. Speaker, we had so many industries that were producing good products in Kenya. Then we had a disease that came in, dumping of second-hand clothes. That killed the textile industry. Then we went to get these, some of these cheap products from Eastern countries, China and so forth. That killed our industries. Mr. Speaker, the most important thing that we need to look at in this country, because we know what we ought to have done and what we did not do, is to get Mr. Speaker, it's not working. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, we need to go deep into the causes of what brought this country down. We need to have a team that can go deep, find out the failures that caused this situation, and get some experts to advise, get the support from experts, Mr. Speaker, because we know where we failed. It's just a question of revisiting those areas and ensuring that the industries that we are proud of in this country are reinstated. Mr. Speaker, we also need to look at the cost of doing business.
Our cost of doing business, Mr. Speaker, went very high to the extent that our goods were overpriced. So that also needs to be looked into, and the government needs to particularly go into power. The cost of power, Mr. Speaker, was a contributory to overpricing of our goods produced in this country. Mr. Speaker, we can talk a lot, but if the implementation is not forthcoming, the recommendations from this House will just be kept elsewhere. So this House also needs to look at the implementation side of whatever laws that have been passed that can promote industries in this country. Mr. Speaker, the trade deficit is growing because look at our Uganda, our trade with Uganda. Uganda used to import a lot of goods from Kenya. Now the balance of trade between Kenya and Uganda is almost coming at par. Why? Because we are getting a lot of goods from Uganda coming into Kenyan markets. Our people have slackened down. Corruption has eaten deep into the industries in Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, as we support this motion, we need to go back and look at the situation and come up with the corrective measures that will encourage industries in Kenya. Without industries and without proper trade arrangements, we will continue growing and having an increased trade deficit in this country. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate Honorable Waluke and ask this House not only to look at the past, let's also look at the future. What do we need for this country, and how can we ensure that the country grows in its trade? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Ibrahim Sahal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this important motion. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are very hardworking people. Many of them are exporters and importers. They import and export from different parts of the world, but when containers arrive in Kenya, the custom people really delay, and that really frustrates the traders. Mr. Speaker, also they are exporters. There are people who export like herbs, and they have challenges with traffic jam and also delay of airlines. Mr. Speaker, recent reports indicate that the country's trade deficit has persisted despite the showdown in imports. The economists say a higher trade deficit will slow down the employment opportunity for our educated youth. I stand to support. Thank you.
The Honorable David Ochieng.
Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable Waluke for a very important and timely motion. Mr. Speaker, in February this year, about 13th February, it was in the media that the President of Uganda, Honorable His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni, is saying that for the first time in 55 years, Uganda has exported more to Kenya than Kenya to Uganda. For the first time in 55 years. And so, Honorable Luke's motion addresses a very current issue, an issue that needs to be sorted out with the emergency and immediacy it deserves. So, Speaker, I've heard members talking about what needs to be done. This country has adopted so many policy papers, from the Sectional Paper number 10 through Sectional Paper number 186. Currently, Mr. Speaker, we have a very robust document called the National Export development and promotion strategy adopted last year with the main and aim of promoting exports, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we live in a country where we like comparing ourselves. When you hear politicians campaigning out, they tell you the way the Asian tigers, the way Kenya and South Korea were at the same level in the 1960s and 70s. You hear them saying the way Kenya and Malaysia were the same level in the 60s and 70s. Mr. Speaker, they will also tell you that these countries, Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, had the same policies at the same time. So, Speaker, I want to tell this House that the major difference between us and the rest of the world, that we talk too much, but we don't implement and we don't have an intention of implementing our policies, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've given this example before this House before, that when South Korea was implementing export substitution projects and programs in the 1980s and early 90s, we were implementing fake gold scams. That's why you've had the golden bag we're talking about golden bag all these years, because that time, South Korea, Malaysia, had same policies saying, if you export more, we're going to give you rebates. We're going to compensate you for exporting more. In Kenya, what happened? People used to export air, and they come and claim compensation. We don't expect to move any further. Mr. Speaker, I've seen the Honorable Luke asking for more policies. We have enough policy in this country. What is lacking is implementation. And this brings squarely the role of Parliament in export promotion. Let us not backpass. Let us not try to say someone else should do. Let us as Parliament, because Parliament now is a very important body, even in budgeting. If we realize that what is lacking is support to small-scale farmers, support to small-scale producers, support to small-scale industries, why can we as Parliament budget and put resources to ensure that this strategy for promoting exports is implemented in the right way? Mr. Speaker, we are not putting our policy makers, we are not putting the executive to account for the monies we are giving them to promote exports. Mr. Speaker, this Parliament, and I'm happy we are debating this in end of July, will be approving a 3 trillion budget. We just approved a 3 trillion budget. We're going to be passing bills this week and next week probably on division of revenue. So, Speaker, the budget we have is laden with a lot of procurement by government. And every 2 years, you hear government saying, we're going to promote Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. Every 2 years. But if you go to our offices, if you go to Parliament office today, if you went to some offices that we have in this Parliament today, you'll find that furniture there are all imported. Carpets there are all imported. The tiles we use are imported. Our roofing materials are imported. We are building a new Parliament building across the road. So, Speaker, cement for building that building across the road is imported. We're importing everything. And then so you're hoping that over time, through importing things, you're going to... It's not possible to sort out trade deficits if you're going to be importing everything and anything. Kenyans have a very weird DNA sometimes, I wonder. That we love foreign things. Love foreign clothes, love foreign shoes, we love foreign toothpaste. We love everything that is foreign. And so we cannot develop...
The Honorable Ochieng, and I would just like to ask you a question, and you don't have to respond. Drive. Because I read a very interesting article in the paper today. One of the articles there was suggesting that members of Parliament should drive the Vivo or the Mobius so that we can buy and promote Kenya.
Mr. Speaker, I'm
Proceed,
Kenyan.
the Honorable
Mr. Speaker, I'm Kenyan. And when I spoke, I was describing a Kenyan. I'm Kenyan. So you can guess that probably I'm driving a foreign car, dressed in foreign clothes. We in love with foreign things, that even where we produce our local things, we don't want to consume them. And so, Mr. Speaker, if we are to sort out the problem of trade deficit in this country, we must walk the talk. Mr. Speaker, last year, Rwanda, who I've had members talking about here, Rwanda decided to ban the import of second-hand clothes into Rwanda. Now, the president there, that time, President Trump, said Rwanda will be removed from some list. Rwanda said, you can go ahead and remove from the list of AGOA, but we have said we are not going to allow the imports of second-hand clothes. And they have stuck to their guns. Now, as here, last month, the president launched the relaunching of Rivertex, but you're still allowing the import of second-hand clothes. So how are we going to sell Rivertex clothes if you are swarming the country with cheaper second-hand clothes? You can't. We should know how to sequence. How do you expect to grow your textile industry when the number of imports of this kind of things we are producing in the country is so high, you'll never ever in our lifetimes be competitive. This is the problem we're having, that in everything else we're producing, and I've said it in this assembly before severally, that if you walked into Nando's today, walked into Galitos today, chicken being consumed there is foreign chicken. We are allowing them to come in with their own inputs. I've said in this assembly before that the reason Ugandans are now selling more eggs into Kenya is that Uganda produces its chicken feed cheaper than Kenya can do. In fact, all animal feeds produced in Uganda are cheaper than what we produce. Reason? We've decided to tax even production. We tax everything because we want to get money to steal. If you're going to tax even things that help our production, how far will you go in make sure that we can export more, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, farmers, and you're going to see this again in the coming long range, you'll see farmers in Nyandarua stuck with tomatoes. You'll see farmers in somewhere in Murang'a, like Kipia, stuck with potatoes. They can't sell because of the subsidiary constraints. They cannot get a way of getting to the market. The roads are bad. They are being taxed by the county government, being taxed by the national government. We cannot grow like that. And so, Mr. Speaker, as we try to develop measures to bridge the trade deficit, Mr. Speaker, we must understand that as a country, we must agree that there are areas where we have failed. We have allowed corruption to steal our soul. We allowed corruption to kill everything else that is good in this country, and that even the plan that we have that is supposed to ensure that Kenya grows. You know, you wonder that a country like Botswana, whose president is in this country today, Botswana down there, has been having steady trade with the rest of the world for the last 10 years than Kenya has. Uganda. Countries that we cannot say are as democratic as we are doing things in a better way than we are doing. And so the role of Parliament as Speaker in not be said. And so I want to request members here that in all the committees you are in, be it Trade Committee, be it Energy Committee, be it Transport Committee, whichever committee, Health Committee we are in, Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that our procurement, the policies we are passing, the budgets we are oversight, Mr. Speaker, we are able to ensure that it meets the goals of promoting exports, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we cannot probably grow if our goods are not being competitive. Reason because of our own national policies. Our labor is very high, our power costs are very high, our transport costs are very high. Then our producers also have to add another cost, corruption. So we cannot sell competitively out them, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is this, that if we as a country has to grow, then we must put our money where our mouths are. We belong to COMESA. We belong to EAC. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, Uganda is now importing the things they used to import from Kenya from China. Egypt is importing things they used to get from Kenya from China and India. Trade diversion. We are not putting our trade partners to account. So if we were to grow, and if Honorable Luke's motion is to mean anything, Mr. Speaker, then we must search our soul as a country and say that this is what we want to do. We want to promote business, we want to promote industry, and because we have enough policy, we want to put our feet down and say enough of corruption, enough of red tape, enough of taxing production, and that it is right, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we promote production so that we create jobs and ensure that this country regains its loss. Mr. Speaker, I support and thank Honorable Luke on his motion.
Very well spoken, the Honorable Chieng. Next week when you come to the House, I expect to see you in a shirt made by Rivertex. The Honorable Kishimo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this motion by Honorable Waluke. Mr. Speaker, of a provision of incentives to potential investors in this country is very key. However, Mr. Speaker, it is also important that the investment promotion and encouragement of investors from outside be also tied to utilization of the local products. Mr. Speaker, it is a bit unfair that sometimes we encourage investors in this country, but most of the products that they use, including EPZ, are usually imported from outside. And you find that these are people who are enjoying tax rebates for many years, and they are also paying our workers very, very poor salaries. Mr. Speaker, this is an area that the government should relook and see whether we also need to put conditions that all the investors, and especially who have been gazetted for EPZ zones, they should also be utilizing the local products so that we can be able to promote job creations in this country and also increase revenues or incomes to our farmers in this country. Mr. Speaker, one of the areas that also needs to be emphasized by the government is also reduction of the cost of production of our products so that we can also be able to compete effectively with other countries and able to export our products. And I'm happy that His Excellency the President, when he was relaunching Rivertex in Eldred, he was able to actually direct that particular company be given a 50% reduction of the cost of electricity. And that will make sure that actually the cost of production will go down, more people will also get employment, and also the products will also be able to compete and free trade, especially in East Africa. Mr. Speaker, another area that we need to relook at is look at the development from the bottom-up approach, rather than from up-bottom approach. One of the areas that has been forgotten and which came through the economic stimulus program was the constituency industrial development centers. These are small industries but very critical and which would have been very useful in improving the economy of this country, and would be producing so many products from various areas because every area is blessed economically differently. And those products would be feeding into the industrial parks now that we are looking at building at the national level. And there will also be areas and or the sources of some of the products can also be exported out of this country. And that will actually help in reducing the trade deficit that we are facing in this country. Mr. Speaker, I can also not forget about the subsidies or the incentives that also needs to be given to our farmers, and especially the giant export areas in tea and coffee in this country. Mr. Speaker, we need a lot of subsidies from the government in terms of farm inputs, fertilizers, chemicals, and other things that will also be able to cushion the farmer so that we can also be able to produce more and export more. Mr. Speaker, in areas like Kirinyaga, and especially Gishugu, and produce some of the best coffee in this world, in the world actually, and these are areas that should also be earmarked cash crops, and it is the high time that the government also came into the rescue of the farmers. Mr. Speaker, other areas that needs to be relooked at, and I'm happy about also the president, when he was also reopening Rivertex, directed that the relevant ministries, BT Cotton has been, a lot of research has been made on it, and especially areas like Mwea, the lower parts of Meru, and other areas, and the production, if BT cotton can be introduced in place of the current indigenous cotton that has been produced in this country, then it has been, in terms of production. Mr. Speaker, that will also help in areas of production of cotton, like in Western Kenya. We have a lot of cotton growing areas, and it will also boost the income by the farmers and also improve the economy. Economy is a wide thing. It's not just looking at the imports and exports. It's also about also creating employment to our people locally through high production of whatever area a certain area produces. Mr. Speaker, we also need a marketing strategy of our products in this country. I don't know where export promotion council went to. It's a very vital institution. It's a very vital body in this country or department that should also be given a lot of support by the government so that it can also be able to earmark where we need to also export our products and come up with the marketing strategies of our products. Mr. Speaker, value addition is also key. We mostly produce things, but when we value add products in this country, we'll also increase the competitiveness and also the income that farmers may also be able to get all from the products. Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, we also need to move from the traditional markets of our products. I'm happy that the government is also looking at wider markets like China, where we have more people, but we also need to relook, especially on tea. We have also relied on exports to Egypt, and it's the high time we also look at export to other places like USA, including things like coffee, so that we can also be able to enhance income. Mr. Speaker, with those many or few remarks, I beg to support the motion, and I beg to support. Thank you.
Very well. The Honorable Oyai Amisi, member for Saboti.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been patiently waiting for this chance to support the motion by Honorable Waluke, my good friend, which is really at the center of our survival as a nation. And actually, at our also key in terms of our sovereignty as a nation. We must, Mr. Speaker, ask ourselves what, as a country, we can do to bridge this huge trade deficit that we are experiencing as a nation. I think what is at the center of this is we try and see how we can do promotion, export promotion, in terms of the government-funded trade fairs, conferences, and exhibitions. More often than not, we bump into foreign trade fairs around our country, in major town centers of our country. But I don't know if we experience the same outside. We have our economic attaches in most of these missions abroad. But we don't know how we've been able to look into that. Most of our production, our exporters locally, they don't have capacities to hold such trade fairs internationally. And I think that's where the government needs to come in to support our local exporters to, promote our locals in terms of trade fairs, exhibitions, and the government-funded conferences abroad in other entities, so that we showcase what we have as a country. And recently we were grappling about maize importation. And we wondered, as a Ministry of Agriculture, why will the minister be preoccupied with supporting and promoting international, commodity exporters and commercial entities? As a Minister for Agriculture, you should be really a friend to the farmers. We cannot be talking about farmers, maize farmers, and other commodity farmers with their produce rotting in various galleries across the country, when our ministry is focused on importation. We should have had, as a ministry, should have had strategies to focus on how to promote our maize farmers, so that we do not have our country trying to import maize while we have a lot in our various stores across. We are ready to pay a premium on importing maize, and we are not ready to pay the same premium to our farmers. So we are not really promoting our farmers. We are focused on promoting foreign entities at the expense of our struggling farmers. And talking about the agriculture, I think the Minister for Agriculture should also have been preoccupied on trying to regularize our land issues. We've seen most of our fertile land that is now, full of real estate. The real estates have mushroomed. For example, Kiambu here. Kiambu County was known for coffee farming. Now, if you walk to Kiambu, you'll see a lot of real estates. We have other lands, for example, Trans Nzoia, where people have come and fragmented land into smaller units, just basically to build.
Luyai, without interrupting you, but time has caught up with you, unfortunately. And it is actually time for the mover to be called upon to reply. I'll allow you 1 minute or two, so that we just wind down, then we have the Honorable Advocate to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need to have our Minister of Agriculture focused more on our lands and the use of our lands, because we've had misplaced priorities on how we are developing our land. Lands that are supposed to be fertile and conducive for agricultural activities are being used for real estate. We need to have a policy that we're going to regulate how we have the land use in this country, so that we also promote and actually safeguard our agriculture as a key economic unit of our nation. And we've been talking about other countries that were at par, like Singapore, South Korea. We also need to look at the energy, the potential of our country, not in terms of just what we have, natural resources, but what we have in terms of our talents. We have brain drain. How do we tap into our Kenyans who go abroad, who sell their potential in terms of their talents? We have the sports soccers. Recently we had the World Cup winner, the French team, that was comprising mostly of the Africans as a team. So we also need to look at the potential of our nation and how to safeguard our talents in areas of education. The countries we talk about, Singapore, these are the countries that have invested heavily also in education, in scientific research, and that's why they're even at part. There are actually flow of income. So that's how you've had countries performing better than us while we were at the same at par. They have invested in other areas like education, scientific research, which we've ignored as a nation. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to second. Thank you. To support.
To support the Honorable Luyai. The member from Moroni, what is out of order?
Out of order. You know, your seat is a seat of power, and we thought you gave consideration of 1 minute, and the man was just moving his motion like it was on real time. So I was reminding you that the people are defying you quietly, are undermining authority.
The Honorable Koyo, I cannot hear you clearly.
I was saying that you gave a consideration 1 minute extension to the speaker who has just sat down, but you forgot, and somehow he began as if it was his real time.
Very well. He had caught the favor of the speaker, but it is well. It is all well. Honorable members, there's a lot of interest in this apparently. The Honorable Waluke, it is your time to reply. And as per our customs and our ways of doing things, you have a choice. You may wish to donate some time to some of these members. So the floor is yours to reply.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Before I reply, I have my few friends here, colleagues who wants to, like Koyo. I'll give Koyo 2 minutes, Honorable Speaker, and the Honorable David, by MP for Kitui, I also give him 3 minutes, and the Luf, also 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker, and Daktari, 1 minute. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Daktari is which one? Dr. Undo. Very well, Dr. Undo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I also want to extend my appreciation to my good friend, Honorable Waluke, for considering me. I am very grateful to Honorable Waluke because this is a very serious motion. I was very busy badmouthing senior people in this society. Badmouthing senior people and coming up with a very good bill, which I support. If you have had an opportunity to travel outside that of late, I want to thank the Speaker. I was able to go to Botswana, and together we convinced the President to come and visit us. And you realize what serious people in a country, people who think forward, can do to push forward the economy of their country. Botswana came here for a bench commission, implemented what they saw here. And today, apart from mining, which is the major income earner, meat processing in Botswana is a major financing venture. And we want to thank them. Singapore, as has been said here, Malaysia, there are people that our founding father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, borrowed them some money, some little money in thousands of dollars. Today, country, we have learned, we want to say that every views that have been exposed here should be going to record and discuss here. Whatever bills we pass here, the committees that are tasked with implementation must follow up and make sure that good bills like this one of the policies that are therein are implemented to the letter. And that is the only way we can push the economy and lifestyle of this country forward. Otherwise, I want to thank you very much, Honorable Luke, and for bringing up this bill and urge the House, the committee, relevant committee tasked with implementation to ensure that once we pass this bill, it does not go to the
Honorable Boni.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and Honorable Waluke for giving me the few minutes to contribute to this motion. And I think, Speaker, the problem we have as a country, in 2017, the government launched a national trade policy, which was aimed at enhancing export growth through value addition and in export-oriented manufacturing and diversification to fully exploit the export opportunity in emerging markets. At the same time, a trade remedies act was also enacted to address unfair trade practices from imports, which have negative impact to our industries, resulting to wide trade deficits. 3 weeks ago, we had a trade strategy which was launched. And when you look at all this, they are trying to address our trade deficit. As we stand last year, our trade deficit was 1.1 billion. Our balance of payments moved from positive 16.9 billion to 103 billion negative, meaning that we are creating demand in other countries and creating employment. Brazil, Russia, India, and China. We need to look at our neighbor, Ethiopia, whereby southern Ethiopia is a very big market of 60 million people, and we need to look at that market. We need to look at construction and fast-track lapsed projects. We need the pipeline from Turkana to Lamu so that we can be able to export the oil. We need a railway from Nairobi to Moyale so that we can be able to export our manufactured goods to Ethiopia.
Honorable Mboni, you only have 3 minutes. I know you had a lot to say, but unfortunately time has caught up with you. The Honorable Hulufa, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and also thank you very much, the mover, for donating part of your time. I support the motion and also support the amendment by Honorable, especially on the aspect of providing incentives to pastoralists and the fisher folks. We need to ask ourselves why we are having this huge deficit. We are not exporting in large quantities. Probably what we are exporting is also not earning enough because we are exporting raw materials rather than finished products. And I would like to focus specifically on livestock sector, and in livestock sector specifically on leather subsector. Mr. Speaker, in terms of contribution to GDP, agriculture contributes 26%, and therefore if we have to bridge this gap, we must invest in value addition in agricultural products, crop products, livestock products, fish products, and so on and so forth. Under our Agenda 4, we have leather value addition as the key focus of manufacturing. Unfortunately, while this sector is focused under Agenda 4, leather, as we speak today, my pastoralists, my people in this house are throwing away hide and skin because they have no good prices for this. Despite the potential of leather to contribute towards creation of 50,000 jobs, and adding, earnings of between 150 million to 250 million if we make proper investment in this sector. We need to borrow a leaf from Ethiopia, which has strategically invested in the leather subsector in 2005, and were able to earn income of 115 million as opposed to what they were earning at the beginning of that process of making strategic investment, which was at the time 16%. And the footwear they produce, the shoes they produce is.
Honorable Dr. Undo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me take this opportunity to sincerely thank Honorable Waluke for first of all giving me an opportunity to assist him in replying to this motion, but most importantly, for bringing these issues that probably we talk off record, for them to be ventilated on the floor of this House. And I want to assure him, Mr. Speaker, that as members of the Trade, Industry and Cooperatives Committee, we will mainstream these discussions with the relevant ministry so that we see how much we can do to actualize the very many policies that have been put in place to support trade and trade facilitation in this country. We also want to assure him that as Trade Committee, we'll seriously interrogate the growing trade deficit among our key trading partners to find out exactly where the problem lies. But from my position as a member of Parliament of Funyula, I recall with nostalgia that many years back, we used to trade with Uganda, but we used to export finished products to Uganda. They'll bring us raw materials. The tide has changed. It's the other way around. We must find out where did the rain start beating us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
The Honorable Waluke, you now have only 2 minutes.
How many?
2 minutes, the Honorable Waluke.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I just want to thank all the members who have contributed on this motion, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sorry for those who came late. There will be another time. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that government should stop cheap import that come to this country, Mr. Speaker, like furniture. Look at this. I'm always proud of this August House, Mr. Speaker, when I look up from the top to the bottom. And when even visitors come to this house, Mr. Speaker, they always ask where did the material come from. And this is our local material. The furniture, Mr. Speaker, is done by Kenya Prisons and National Youth Service, Mr. Speaker. So the government should support institutions like those ones, Mr. Speaker, so that we avoid importing things like furniture to this country, Mr. Speaker, and will save a lot of money, Mr. Speaker. And also government should utilize supporting the Chuakali sector, Mr. Speaker, because Chuakali employs so many youth, millions of youth, Mr. Speaker, are employed by Chuakali sector, Mr. Speaker, to reduce the raw material. The cost of raw material should be reduced, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it will be important to note, the nation to note, and the House to note, that Kenya will not be able to repay its foreign debts if this trade deficit cannot be addressed properly and balanced. That is a point to note, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the government, I want to thank the President for trying to revive the industries like Kikomi, we want him to revive, like Rivertex, and also Malakis Chinnery. Malaba Malakis Chinnery, Mr. Speaker, was there and it collapsed so many years ago. But otherwise, Mr. Speaker, before I move, Mr. Speaker, I stand on Standing Order 53 cap 3, Mr. Speaker, to defer putting the question until another time, Mr. Speaker, because due to lack of quorum, so that you put it at the next time, Mr. Speaker, either tomorrow or wherever you will choose, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, I want to thank you. I want to thank the clerk's office, and I want to thank each and everybody for supporting and contributing on this motion, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move.
Very well done. The Honorable Waluke, good job, well done. And the members who have participated in this particular motion, they have done so well. I will accede to your request that the question be put at the next time when this matter is set up on the order paper. I therefore direct that we move to the next business.
Order number 14, the National Hospital Insurance Fund Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 5 of 2019, second reading.
The Honorable Wangwe had requested that this business be deferred. I therefore direct that the business be deferred to such other time that it will be set down for consideration. Next order.
Order number 15, the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 6 of 2019, second reading.
The Honorable Ndindi Nyoro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I am introducing this bill today, Mr. Speaker, as an amendment to our Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Bill of Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Bill, Mr. Speaker. And I'm actually amending Section 48. Because as it is currently, Mr. Speaker, in our current laws in the fight against corruption, there is a threshold of the penalty in terms of the fine and also in terms of imprisonment. And Mr. Speaker, what my bill is seeking to do is to actually increase this penalty, Mr. Speaker, because currently in the bill, the penalty that is there prescribed, Mr. Speaker, is that a person convicted of an offense, that is an offense in terms of anti-corruption and economic crime, Mr. Speaker, is liable for a fine not exceeding 1 million shillings. And Mr. Speaker, of an imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years. Mr. Speaker, my bill is seeking to open up this, Mr. Speaker, and I'm just paraphrasing, and of course, increasing the penalty. Instead of a fine not exceeding 1 million, Mr. Speaker, we are exchanging that or amending that to a fine not less than 1 million, Mr. Speaker. and also imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years, Mr. Speaker, we are opening that to not less than 10 years. Because, Mr. Speaker, as you could have noted, our country currently, Mr. Speaker, we are grappling with these kind of crimes, Mr. Speaker, which are hurting our economy, Mr. Speaker, in a great manner. And, Mr. Speaker, as you know, corruption is on two sides. That is the supply side and the demand side, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, what my bill is seeking to do is actually to instill a bit of fear, Mr. Speaker, to those who would be wishing or even thinking or contemplating tampering with public resources, Mr. Speaker. But even before I go there, Mr. Speaker, our country is a very rich country. We are a country with a lot of resources, Mr. Speaker, and I actually think our country can survive very well on surplus without actually borrowing any money from outside of our country. And, Mr. Speaker, because you're also Kenyan, and I'm sure you see around, Mr. Speaker, most of the public resources end up in private pockets, Mr. Speaker, without rendering any service to the taxpayer, the Kenyan people who actually work very hard to pay our taxes. And, Mr. Speaker, it is on this basis, Mr. Speaker, that it is upon us as leaders to streamline how we spend public resources, Mr. Speaker, in a manner that, Mr. Speaker, gives utility to the people who should actually enjoy the public resources. And going back, Mr. Speaker, to the issue of demand and supply, Mr. Speaker, most of our corruption in our country, of course, happens in terms of procurement. Mr. Speaker, it is two-pronged also in terms of procurement, because, of course, there is the contractor and there is the public officer, Mr. Speaker, who adds these tenders through a procurement process. And on the demand side, Mr. Speaker, we find that actually most of the demand for corruption, Mr. Speaker, actually comes from public officials. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have very many gifted business people in this country. But, of course, for you to access, to do business with government, Mr. Speaker, you have to oil some hearts. Mr. Speaker, it is upon us, first of all, to curtail corruption on the demand side, Mr. Speaker, because you have dealt with the majority of corruption issues in our country. Mr. Speaker, also, there are two propositions in the fight against corruption in any country. And, Mr. Speaker, one is the one that seeks to appeal to the patriotism of the people of the country, Mr. Speaker, or the citizens, and especially public officers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this has been able to work in various jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, and especially where people actually love their countries. But, Mr. Speaker, in our country, we are so mechanical, Mr. Speaker, that everyone minds their own business. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, in a country like ours, we have now to appeal to the other area that is number two, that appeals to fear, Mr. Speaker, and that instills fear to those people who would imagine engaging in corruption and economic crimes, Mr. Speaker. And I'm borrowing this, Mr. Speaker, from several countries. A country like Singapore, Mr. Speaker, in around 1986, there was a housing minister who was called Te Cheang, Mr. Speaker. And he was charged by the then Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, to, of course, oversee the housing project within Singapore, Mr. Speaker, a country currently now that is enjoying over 90% home ownership. But, Mr. Speaker, this minister engaged in collecting bribes from around 1982 to around 1983 to a tune of $1 million, Mr. Speaker. And the equivalent of the EACC of Singapore, of course, started, Mr. Speaker, going for the minister. And because he was afraid of the Prime Minister, he started reaching out, of course, for help, Mr. Speaker, in a way of patronage. But Lee Kuan Yew told him to first finish the business with the equivalent of EACC of Singapore and then look for him afterwards. Mr. Speaker, this minister could actually not carry the kind of embarrassment that came about with that kind of grave matters, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this gentleman committed suicide, Mr. Speaker, for embarrassing the government of Lee Kuan Yew. Mr. Speaker, of course, as you know, that cannot happen in our country. Because in our country, instead of committing suicide, actually the people who engage in these kind of crimes are promoted to higher offices, either by the population or even by the system itself. And therefore, it is upon us, Mr. Speaker, to now engage the issue of strengthening the penalty, Mr. Speaker, with the hope of instilling fear to those people who would want to engage in these kind of crimes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are some other countries that have done very well in combating corruption, and especially by enhancing penalties. Mr. Speaker, as you could be aware, a country like South Korea currently, the immediate former president, who is actually the daughter of the founding president of South Korea, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Park, is actually serving jail term of 25 years for engaging in corruption activities actually of less magnitude than the kind of magnitude that we are seeing in our country, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I'm just citing some of the countries that have gone the route that I'm proposing. Also a country like China, Mr. Speaker,